Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo, Sam Monson. We're live on YouTube. And it's time, Sam, for our last, very sad, last regular season full preview of the year. Week 18 preview.
Week 18. We've made it.
Feels like we just started.
I know.
Really? I mean, legit. Season's flying. Fastest season in NFL history. But we're here at Week 18.
We are here at Week 18, ready to do the final regular season show.
So we're going to go game by game, go through all the picks. We need a little update, though, on where we are from a picks perspective.
Yeah, and actually not just picks. We got all kinds of results from all sorts of things. So if you go to the Discord, link to which will be in the description of the show, you can get access to all these things. We have a bunch of stuff that's been running. There are fantasy leagues that we're running in the Discord. They have winners now. So remember, we have 3 leagues. There was the Big Goofy League. Somebody called Scott Maximus won the Big Goofy League. We had the Grumpy League. Somebody called Gregor3 won that. And the Late League, which is kind of extra bonus one, somebody called Hias, H-I-A-S, won that one. So those people are going to be getting hooked up with some form of merch, TBD on that. Then we have the Sleeper Leagues, which are a Pick'em and a Survivor Pool. The Survivor Pool finally has a winner. Somebody called Angel Cal is the winner. He won with the Bills over the Jets last week. But a shout out to the brutal beat of somebody called Poptree142, who lost because the awful number 1 seed destined New York Giants decided to show up and crush the Colts.
He had the Colts?
He had the Colts in his final week Survivor and got beat.
That's beautiful Survivor play too, right? You've got this Week 17 game.
He must have been so confident going into that final week.
Year.
Right. Less so maybe when Anthony Richardson went down, but still, he must have felt pretty good about that. And got beat. Somebody called Golden S4 and SWGTWA were both alive by the end, but joined later in the league, so they don't win. Okay, and then the Pick'em League, somebody called Guamadon Alex N is in the lead with 148 wins. I am still tied for 4th, 2 games back. So
you're tied for 4th?
2 games back with the final week to go. Harry, the child, is tied for 60th with 133 wins.
I was tied with him just 2 weeks ago.
And now you are tied for 118th with 117 wins.
All right. I have determined, this is awful again, my picks. I have determined this summer, we're going to work. I'm gonna build something out to pick games.
You're gonna create a model to defeat the system.
Yes.
You're actually gonna. Okay.
Yes.
That's all.
I know people have been doing this for years. I don't have the same math chops that they do, but I'm gonna automate something. Got to do it. I gotta model something. I can't just use my intuition because clearly it's not good enough. So I'm done with
evidently
this.
not. Although
2 out of the last 3 years have been historically bad.
Well, this is interesting. This one is sort of middle of the road. Previously, you were literally the most powerful betting angle.
I'm surprised
in the game, just in the opposite direction of the one you intended it to be.
You're missing a big point here. There are 200 something entries into this thing, and I'm surprised you haven't taken this angle because you're always looking for ways to tear me down. There's a lot of people that just didn't make
Stop doing it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm as bad as it gets.
No. You're not as bad
of all
as
the
it
people that have continued to make picks, and I missed like 6 picks 1 week, so that hurt. I might be in last. I might be in dead last out of people in our Discord that are picking games.
No, again, I would agree if I hadn't seen your previous low, which is literally like statistically impossible, was how bad you were a couple of seasons ago. You're not there. I mean, you're bad, but you're not. I've seen worse.
Thank you.
And I've seen worse from you.
So I think I'm officially inspired to model this out for next year. And so we'll have a game picking model that I should, if you want to use it, use it. We'll see how good it is.
You're going to have to start doing those disclaimers. This is not financial advice.
Yes, but these are my picks based off some data and
this is just an idiot creating
emotion,
a model.
No emotion whatsoever.
Okay.
I will never reference, unless it's in the model, the flying cross country and start times and.
What if it turns out all those things are statistically
legit? Maybe that's the only thing that matters is travel time and days of rest.
You put them all together and you're good.
Maybe we'll model it. We'll see. So I'm going to start going to work on a game model for next year because this is embarrassing.
Yeah, no, it is. It's very embarrassing for you. Less so
for me.
The rest of us.
But you love, as I said, you love tearing me down. So
I do find it funny.
All right, man. We're going game by game. It's all brought to you by PrizePicks. We'll get your lineup coming here in just a little bit. You could join us playing at PrizePicks. Check the mic is the promo code for $50 instantly when you play $5. And then tomorrow morning, we're flying to Vegas. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Stupidly early tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
Turns out.
We decided we're going to get into Vegas by 8:30, which means board time is 6:20 local time.
Yes. A.M. That's not going to be fun.
Yeah, not great. We're not supposed to tell people when we're leaving the house. Remember? Famous people getting robbed.
I mean, there's people remaining in our houses, though.
That's true. Do not go.
Yeah.
Do not rob us. My
Right.
wife will kill you.
We're not leaving an empty house. We're just leaving the house.
Anyway, we ready to get going?
Sure.
Did we miss anything up top?
You tell me.
Check out yesterday's episode, by the way. It was great. It was great. Lions preview. If you want more Lions preview discussion, Tim Twentyman and Matthew Collar broke it down from the Lions and from the Vikings angle. We had a lot of fun on yesterday's show. Good shouty show segment, the whole deal. So go check out yesterday if you haven't. Mm-hmm. All right, let's get to the games. We got 2 on Saturday, 14 on Sunday. The first Saturday game, Cleveland Browns at the Baltimore Ravens. Ravens win, and they win the AFC North. And it looks like they might win, Sam.
You think?
They're favored by 17.5.
Yeah.
Against the Browns. 3-13 Browns, 11-5 Ravens.
That's quite a large spread for a division game.
It's a 17.5 point spread with a 41.5 over/under per our friends at FanDuel.
Wow.
Which means, they're 28-3 type of game here is in the cards.
Yeah.
Reason to watch?
I mean, there's reasons to watch. Number one, Josh Allen's probably not playing. Joe Burrow will be the MVP. We've got to keep track of the final MVP statement to be made.
Last MVP moments for Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson's final MVP his closing arguments is what we're going to be seeing here.
I do think Lamar's best statement to make is less touchy-feely this year and more the stats.
Yeah. So if he just goes
Allen,
out there and throws another 5 touchdowns on the board, his case becomes even harder to argue against.
What is he at 42? Because it's a little disingenuous to add passing and rushing touchdowns and put them against interceptions, because you have to put fumbles in there to make it better. But what is he at 42 touchdowns and 4 picks?
Total? Yeah.
More, whatever it is. If he tacks on 4 or 5 more touchdowns.
Right. And doesn't throw an interception.
And that's what I think gets to the voters the most, is not so much the feels. They're going to go at the end of the year, and your colleagues, AP voters, the other 49 are going to look at these stats and be like, they're going to go to write in their vote, and they're like, I think it's Josh Allen, and then they're going to see the stats side by side. I think that's going to have an impact. And be like, wait a second, I need to reconsider Lamar. He has 48 touchdowns and only 4 interceptions.
But last year it went the other way. Last year it went the other way.
No, it didn't, though.
It did. Lamar Jackson's stats were not as good as Dak Prescott's stats last year, but Lamar had those signature games all the way along. And it was like Lamar's MVP.
Dak was never, because people watched the games enough to know that Dak wasn't in the conversation, because in every big game, he's stat padded, right? We know that this is like a toss-up. We know that Lamar and Allen is a toss-up. So you're stepping into this toss-up situation, and on paper, you're going to see the stats, and you're going to see Lamar's touchdowns to interceptions, and that's going to influence people. I'm telling you, at least 5 people that vote like you do are going to be influenced merely by those 2 stats sitting side by side. And Lamar has a chance to
what do you mean vote like I do?
Like have a vote, get a chance to vote.
Right.
Not vote in the manner that you do.
Got it. Important
vote as you do.
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, that's what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, so that's a reason to watch, right? What Lamar does and adds to his tally.
Myles Garrett's questionable. He's the other reason to watch.
Right. That's unfortunate, and that the only reason to watch for the Browns side of things might not be playing. That is unfortunate.
Yeah, so you're at the point of the look, we're not going to break down too much of the X's and O's of a lot of these games. Detroit, Minnesota, we will more. But Cleveland, half their team, you rest people who are hurt and, end a lot of seasons. So Cleveland's just finishing out the string. Baltimore's trying to stay healthy, take care of business. They win the North. And if they win, they will have the 3 seed locked up.
Yep.
And home playoff game, because they could still technically lose the North to Pittsburgh.
I don't think Cleveland can jump anybody in terms of draft position. They're 3rd at the moment behind New England and Tennessee. I think if they finish on the same win total as New England and Tennessee, they remain behind them. But theoretically, again, we've talked before, like the Browns having a way to get a quarterback would be very valuable for a team that's kind of stuck with Deshaun Watson contractually, right? And people are projecting various other quarterbacks into that starting spot. But the cheapest way out of this mess is a rookie. And if they actually found themselves in position to draft a rookie, I think they would find that quite a nice roster salve. And for it like that, Andrew Berry, there's a lot of analytics driving this Browns organization. Generally, they might be one team that actually is institutionally motivated to not fight that hard in this game.
Intern Anthony's done the good research for us. I mean, it is, if the rare thing happens here, Tennessee and New England do win and Cleveland loses, you have number one.
Yeah,
New
New
is
England
the path to number one. It's 9.2% chance here.
New England in particular are facing a Buffalo team with nothing to play for. So,
and Houston's not really playing for anything, right?
Right.
With Tennessee, and Tennessee's wearing the old Oilers jerseys. A lot of Houston fans get upset about that, but
Houston have been playing pretty badly. So
yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibility. So that's the game. That's the first game on Saturday. The other stat just to highlight here: Baltimore #1 scoring defense since week 11. Right, we still have it in our head that maybe the early season defensive woes are there. They have turned a corner. It is similar to Mike McDonald's first year, where they started slow in 2022 and maybe turned it around. Is that Kyle Hamilton moving back, some turnover at corner, Nate Wiggins maybe emerging at corner? There's been some changes in Baltimore's defense, and so maybe peaking at the right time on that side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, coming out of the game last week, I floated the idea or the case for Kirby Joseph as Defensive Player of the Year. I think you could make a similar case for Kyle Hamilton as Defensive Player of the Year. Again, it's kind of contingent on the fact that there's no absolutely dominant standout defensive lineman that generally win those awards. But Kyle Hamilton, for the second year in a row, was a dominant force in and around the line of scrimmage. I mean, he completely changes what you can run, wide receiver screens, short stuff to his side of the field. And Baltimore's defense on the back end was in real trouble earlier in the season. They shifted Hamilton. They moved him back into the secondary, started playing him way more as a true free safety, and the entire group was transformed. Now, was that a one-to-one? Kyle Hamilton moving back equals Baltimore's defense becoming the best in the NFL? Probably not, but I think it's probably a significant factor in that. He's got, a very good PFF grade. It's right up there with the best safeties in the NFL. He's essentially excelled at two radically different positions within the secondary this season. I think he can make a Defensive Player of the Year case for Kyle Hamilton as well.
I like it, man. Look at you putting all the cases out there. All right, man, let's make a pick. 17.5 is a spread. Baltimore at home against the Browns.
I am going with the Ravens to cover a giant point spread.
DTR, what's he averaging? 3.5 yards per attempt in his career?
Yeah. The worst in NFL history.
All right, second game of the Saturday doubleheader, Cincinnati Bengals at the Pittsburgh Steelers. The 8-8 Bengals at the 10-6 Steelers. Bengals favored by 1.5. So Pittsburgh has multiple things to potentially play. Obviously, Cincinnati needs to win just to have a chance, and then they're begging for Miami to lose and the Broncos to lose. Based off what happens in the first game here, Pittsburgh could be playing for the North if the Browns somehow pulled the upset against the Ravens. Let's say that's unlikely, but they still have seeding available, right? They could be the 5 or the 6 based off what happens with the Chargers. So Pittsburgh's still playing for something here, plus a division game in Pittsburgh. Bengals favored by 1.5 here on the road against the Steelers. Steelers won in a shootout in the first matchup.
Yeah, and we said, the most powerful thing the Steelers have on the line is this idea of Houston is stumbling, listlessly into the playoffs versus the other teams who you might have to travel to who look very good. You want to have the 5 seed in the AFC because the alternatives are significantly less attractive, I think. I think the Steelers are absolutely motivated to win this. Cincinnati, they're not going to know until the following day whether it matters or not, but part of them having any shot of making the playoffs is contingent on winning this game. So I think you do, even independent of the fact these teams hate each other generally, I think you have two teams that are absolutely motivated to play and win this game if they can.
As I mentioned, first game was a shootout. Pittsburgh got the win. Joe Burrow goes 28 of 38, 3 touchdowns, 5 big-time throws. He's been, we've talked a lot about Burrow. At least 3 big-time throws per PFF in, 6 out of his last 7 games. I mean, it's been wild, man. The guy's played extremely well. He's got Higgins, who's been hot as he heads into free agency. He's trying to keep Higgins around. Jamar Chase has been great. So I think it's, that show, again, that trio What can they do? Mike Gesicki's been a nice complementary piece over the last few weeks with those guys. I think it's going to be another potential shootout here.
Yeah, it should be. I wonder what damage the Steelers' defensive line can do to Cincinnati's offensive line, which is a little banged up and not great to begin with. TJ Watt has not been, I think, the same force since he hurt his ankle. Like, it's definitely diminished the impact that he can have. He's still dangerous. He's still effective, but he's not, where he was earlier in the season, where he was a massive problem for anybody in any given week. I think now they are relying a little bit more on the other players on that defensive front, but they still have more than enough of them to cause damage.
What do you make of the Steelers? I mean, they were a 3-loss team heading into the Week 15 stretch that culminated. That has now been, you lose at Philadelphia, lose at Baltimore, lose against Kansas City at home, all pretty handily, right? I mean,
right.
Didn't really have much of a chance in any of those games. Baltimore was a 1-score game into the fourth quarter. But you lost against 3 of the best teams in the NFL. It felt like a different Steelers team earlier in the year, didn't it?
They also haven't had George Pickens out there for those games.
No, I know.
And Pickens, theoretically, I think is back this week.
He was there against Kansas City, though.
Yeah, but he is their most important player in terms of like weaponry, and they haven't really had him. Like, part of the dynamic of Russell Wilson coming into the lineup, a quarterback, and replacing Justin Fields is Wilson is able to theoretically unlock George Pickens with those, the rainbow deep shots, the just give him a chance plays that Justin Fields wasn't even putting in the air. Absent Pickens, obviously that disappears. Like, it doesn't have the same effect when you're throwing it to Van Jefferson or whatever.
One thing I forgot to mention at the top was about our subscribers.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. And encouraging people to subscribe here.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's bad timing to do it, but let's do it.
It's probably not good timing.
It's not great, right in the middle of things. Let's encourage people to subscribe here on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
Look at that.
And an audio.
We've highlighted the last few weeks, only 1/3 of our viewers are subscribed, which means 2/3 of you could just click that button, subscribe, click the bell, too, for the notification on the YouTube channel. Appreciate everybody. And appreciate Amon-Ra St. Brown, too, for also encouraging or demanding that Lions fans pay the bills and subscribe. Appreciate everybody that's already subscribed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so look, I think Pittsburgh, like, it's big just because there's stuff on the line, but they've also lost 4 out of their last 6 with or without Pickens. I mean, you can't be that dependent on him. Defense has regressed just a little bit, and what felt like a different Steelers team, right? Every other time they got into the playoffs over the last 4 or 5 years, it's like, yeah, they're not going beyond round 1. There was a point in the middle of the season where you said, hey, I could see them upsetting Kansas City, and they always play Baltimore tough, and you could see them upsetting Baltimore. And I don't see that as much. And if they lose this one and really stumble into the playoffs, I'm not saying it's full last year's Eagles, but it's, similar as the stumble into the playoff team that doesn't look like they're going beyond one game.
Well, this one in particular would be damaging, I think. I mean, you can make the case that, look, Philadelphia on the road against Baltimore, and then against Kansas City, those are 3 teams that right now look like they're in the elite category, right? 2 teams that are a number 1 seed, a team that was vying for the number 1 seed until like last week, and the Baltimore Ravens, who look like they're as hot as anybody at the moment. Like, you can make the case that that's just the difference between true elite contender and not, right? Like, and that was the case during those Christmas games. It felt like contender versus pretender across the board. There are levels to this game, right? Cincinnati, though, is just trying to get themselves like back into the playoffs. If you can't beat that team, that's a much worse indictment of your potential to progress in the postseason than losing to a team that you expect to be in the Super Bowl, The
other storyline stuff that I think is interesting in Week 18, is this the last game for player X? Together, T. Higgins being a free agent here with that whole saga, and Cincinnati holding on to him the last couple of years, but now is this it? Burrow's rallying to keep him around. So
everybody is. I mean, Burrow is, rallying. Burrow is putting pressure on the organization to keep him around. Jamar Chase is advocating for it and saying, we could all coexist. T. Higgins is saying he doesn't necessarily need to be paid wide receiver 1 money. He would take potentially less to stay around with Jamar Chase and Joe. Like, everyone is saying this could work. And yet the Bengals don't appear to have any real interest in making it happen. I wonder at what point even if the plan was to, franchise tag him, let him walk, like at what point are they all making enough noises that you go, we should probably at least explore this. Like, let's see what the bargain is. Because they've been opportunistic in the past. Like, they weren't planning on signing Orlando Brown when he was a free agent. And all of a sudden his price tag dropped to the point where they're like, we should probably do this.
Yeah.
Like, this would be silly not to make this deal. So I do wonder, like, at what point does somebody reach out and say, hey, you thought you couldn't make this happen? Actually, it's not a bad deal. I guess you should probably,
I have a feeling they might lock up Chase and Higgins this offseason, make it all work, and go from there. We'll talk plenty this offseason, but just in case it's the end, it's been a good run. Burrow and Higgins. All right, Bengals by 1.5. Where are you going with this one?
I'm going with the Bengals. I feel like I do the storyline as much as anything else. I kind of want them to win this game just to see what happens on Sunday.
Yeah, and then see what happens with Miami, see what happens with Denver. I'll take the Bengals as well. Harry's going to take Cincinnati. By the way, Harry's going to take Baltimore. People, I gave my pick, but not the 9-year-old who's got better picks than me.
Right. I mean, his is
so Harry, just for those keeping track at home, somebody is definitely doing that. Harry's got Baltimore.
It's also in the sleeper app.
And Cincinnati. You can see it in the sleeper app, of course, yes. All right, man, let's get to your prize picks. We're going to go right to this.
Let's.
Your prize picks. I gave my lineup yesterday, so unveil your lineup for this week, for Week 18.
Well, I wanted to pay homage to the great Amon-Ra St. Brown because he did us a solid. I was going to do him a solid likewise and predicted he would get in the end zone, but apparently they took that off the board.
It's too likely.
They knew he was going to score,
too likely,
so they took it off the board. So I've had to adjust. But I'm going to stay in the same game. I believe that Sam Darnold will cook against this depleted Detroit Lions defense, and it will be the shootout that our guests, Tim Twentyman and Matthew Collar, were predicting yesterday. Both quarterbacks will go nuts. Therefore, Sam Darnold will pass for more than 277.5 passing yards. It's going to be 3 Bills, clearly.
Oh, yeah. I think that makes sense.
I will also go with Mark Andrews and the Baltimore Ravens offense against this Cleveland team with nothing to play for. Well, Mark Andrews will get more than 35.5 receiving yards. Yeah, that's got to.
I like those tight end
50,
projections
60?
that are in the 30s. Yeah. I've picked a few of those this year.
We're going to get some good numbers from Mark Andrews. I have confidence there. And then the adjustment that I made, going to that Pittsburgh game, George Pickens. I believe George Pickens will get in the end zone. Therefore, George Pickens will have more than a half touchdown. So that's my replacement for amon-ra. George Pickens will get in the end zone instead.
That's two Saturday games, and then you got to wait till you wait all day for Sunday Night Football.
Wait all day, yeah.
This is a wait all day for Sunday Night Football type of game this week.
Oh, this is like this is the jackpot.
Somebody asked me if I was actually, because I pushed back on that.
Yeah.
I said, no, I'm going to watch the other games first. I'm not going to wait for Sunday. But this is close. It's a close to wait all day for Sunday night.
Yeah, I mean, it's being billed as, the best game, the best regular season game in history. It's the first time apparently two teams have met with this volume of wins it's the first time it's happened before the championship game level. So teams with 14-plus wins have met before, but only in the championship or the Super Bowl.
And I'll be waiting all day to see Darnold and his passing projection. I think
more than 277.5.
Do you want a quick recap on what you have?
Darnold, more than 277.5 passing yards. Mark Andrews, Baltimore Ravens tight end, more than 35.5 receiving yards. And then George Pickens, the number one weapon for the Pittsburgh Steelers, to have more than a half touchdown.
All right, and just to review my lineup from yesterday, I got Drake London going more than 65.5 receiving yards against the Carolina Panthers. Love the way London playing with Michael Penix Jr., and I think they're going to continue to attack on the outside there. I got Bo Nix more than 232.5 passing yards because Denver, season on the line against Kansas City's backups, as many backups as they could possibly play, just to be realistic here. So I think Bo Nix has a big game. And then Mike Evans chasing that 1,000 yards. The projection's 93.5 receiving yards, but I'm still taking it. I think Evans and Baker Mayfield, with their season on the line, they're going to cook once again. So Drake London, Bo Nix, and Mike Evans for me on the positive end on all their projections. Mm-hmm. Of course, you could play as well. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code CheckTheMic for $50 instantly when you play your first $5. All right, man, back to the games. That Denver-Kansas City game that I mentioned. Kansas City Chiefs at the Denver Broncos. Of course, the Broncos are favored by 10.5. Because it's not just Carson Wentz. It's Carson Wentz, and I'm sure Travis Kelce's not going to play.
Friends.
Any other significant player. is going to play.
Yeah, it's the Chiefs resting presumably as many people as they can possibly rest.
Chiefs have the number 1 seed locked up, so they're going to be on bye week 1. Denver win, and they're in this one. It's Sunday at 4:25.
Yeah, and this is the reason Cincinnati, et cetera's playoff odds are still so low, because Denver's the only thing that matters for them is contingent on Denver losing this game, and they're facing the Chiefs backups, not the Chiefs. So, and they would have they've given the Chiefs close games, let alone the Chiefs backups. So you can certainly understand why it's a 10-point margin in Denver's favor. And it makes sense. I mean, they're going to have the advantage pretty much everywhere, even if Carson Wentz, is capable of a high-end game and a decent performance and all those things in a vacuum. As you said, who's he throwing to? Who's protecting him on the offensive line? Doesn't feel like it's a game where Kansas City's going to have much chance.
That's where I said, like, the NFL putting division games at the end of the season makes sense because, they could be playing for the division. And sometimes it works out. And other times it's like, we lost out this season on a really good Chiefs-Broncos game, right? We lost out on that just because of the way the Chiefs clinched early.
Like look at the AFC North, right? Like on the one hand, you've got two teams that theoretically have something to play for. So Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, we expect to be a really good game because both teams at least have something on the line. Meanwhile, you've got Baltimore, Cleveland, where it's a 18-point spread because one team's been buried for weeks and the other team doesn't have anything to play for really either. And it's nothing, right? This is similar. Like you have this game that could have been another great matchup between Kansas City and Denver, and instead it's like, the Chiefs are resting everybody.
Yeah. And I don't know. It's a little unfortunate because, like, imagine if Kansas City was playing for something and Denver needed to win it in against Mahomes' Chiefs, and Miami needed to beat the Jets, and Cincinnati needed to beat Pittsburgh. It would be a better weekend. But
I think it's just an unfortunate. I don't think it's necessarily the division aspect that makes it worse, but it's just an unfortunate reality of when you have teams that clinch. The last few games of the season or the last week of the season can be complete dead rubber games because they don't care.
So even when Mahomes is out there, Denver has been playing Kansas City really tough. Remember in the first matchup, of course, Denver was in position for the game-winning field goal, got blocked. I thought Bo Nix, he's been impressive overall as a rookie. One of the impressive things to me was how he stood in there against Kansas City's defense. He was one of the first, I think, QBs to have some success against that defense earlier in the year, especially on third down, made some key plays. Part of the reason why I took Bo Nix's projection, I think he does have a big game against Kansas City as they're just trying to stay healthy, and Kansas City doesn't play for another 2 weeks here. So they've got some time off. It's going to be a lot of time off for Kansas City's key players here.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's like they're the opposite end of the Detroit attitude, right? Like the Lions had nothing to play for last week and still went out there like everything was on the line. Kansas City repeatedly have demonstrated that if there's nothing on the line, we're not risking people.
Can we discuss that really quick? I mean, Dan Campbell came out and said, hey, you only have a 53-man roster, you have 46 active, you can't really bench everybody. We prepared everybody for this game, and so we played. And that's fine. That's the way Detroit was operating. And a lot of people are like, see, you can't bench everybody. And it's like, well, sure you can. Like Kansas City does this every year. And even Bill Belichick came out and said, oh, you got 7 inactives. How do I tell the starting guard he has to play, but my quarterback's not playing and my receiver's not playing? It's like you tell them. Teams do this every year. They rest their most important players. And it is true. You cannot literally bench or rest all 22 starters. You can't do it. Like there's just not enough roster spots to go around. So some players are going to play. But yeah, Mahomes and Kelsey and probably the DeAndre Hopkins and Xavier Worthy, like all the Chris Jones, like they're not going to play.
Right. I mean, just look
and it's not going to affect their locker room. It's going to be fine.
No, the idea that you can't rest players is clearly nonsensical. I mean, just watch the lineup. When they announced the starters for the Kansas City Chiefs this week, look through them and count how many players are not out there that would be playing in a normal game. You can rest a lot of people and still field, an active game day roster, and the Chiefs will. So that's not a reason that you can't do that. But it is interesting that you've got, theoretically, these could be the 2 number 1 seeds, right? And one of them will be resting players in similar situations. Obviously, Detroit's no-matter game was the week before. But in 2 theoretical games with nothing on the line, the Chiefs will be resting as many people as they possibly can. The Lions rested nobody and played like the game meant everything to them. there's no. I don't think there's necessarily a right answer to this.
Same thing we say about the preseason. When do you sit starters? Do you play them a series? Play them two? It's the same discussion. Let teams do what they do. Kansas City's always been in the camp to rest.
Yeah.
Kansas City. So they're going to have the number 1 seed playing. The win. So here's the deal. If Denver wins and gets in, they're probably a 7 here. And if they were to pull the upset against Buffalo, they're going to Kansas City in the divisional round. So that's what we could see this in a few weeks here again with actual starters. Denver by 10.5 here. By the way, this is going to go head to head with the other game that matters, which we'll talk about in a second, which is Miami and the Jets. So there's no way that Denver would know that they're in ahead of this. They have to play it out because it's going head to head with the Miami game that will determine, also help determine if Denver gets into the playoffs.
I believe Kansas City's backups will keep it within 10 or whatever the number is. I'm using the sleep wrap, which is different to whatever we're working with.
I'll take Denver to win it and cover. No, Harry's going to take Kansas City. I'll take Denver to cover it. You'll take Kansas City.
Does he know the dynamics of backups and, have you explained that they're not going to be playing anybody of consequence?
I have not.
You trying to mislead the child?
I will
steal wins on him.
Before I will let him put his official sleeper picks in while giving him all of that information.
By the way, we've had rather unfortunate incidents where we keep arriving dressed the same.
Yes.
This close this morning to wearing something almost identical to that.
We should lay it out ahead of time.
We're gonna have to start.
I'm wearing the black hoodie.
Ridiculous.
I'm wearing whatever this thing
I literally yesterday I got a shirt for something else, and I bought something that looks a lot like that.
Or
and I almost wore it.
We should always wear the same thing and be in uniform at all
right?
times.
Yeah, be like an old married couple. It'd be perfect. Or maybe that's how we identify ourselves at Circa. You'll know us because we'll be dressed the same.
Somebody said so. We should, if you have a grumpy shirt and I have a big goofy shirt, we should
get a cartoon creation of each.
We should probably lean into that.
Well,
we'll wear those.
I don't know what the copyright laws are, but what if we get a picture of Goofy and just put your head on it, and then we get a picture of Oscar the Grouch and park that head on it?
I mean, we've been sued multiple
I'm sure that's
times
close
before.
enough.
I'm sure that's fine.
I'm sure that's enough. You can. What is it? Fair use, where you can edit the image enough. That feels close enough.
Yeah, we could do that. All right, let's get to the other 425 game that matters here. Miami Dolphins at the New York Jets. The Dolphins favored by 1.5 here. If they win, they have a chance, as long as Denver loses at the same time here.
Mm-hmm.
Over-unders 39.5 per FanDuel.
What is our Tua status? Because he had the hip injury last week, didn't play. It was a late surfacing injury. Does that make sense? He's been limited ahead of this game. But that's a big thing. Like, this also feels like, so obviously Tua's status is huge for this game. Doesn't this also just feel like the game where Aaron Rodgers finally plays like just amazing football, goes out with an absolute bang, and not even to convince the Jets that it's worth one more go around, but just when finally nothing is on the line. It's all been a train wreck. Everyone's mocking them last week as they're going out there with the boombox. Josh Allen sitting in the corner smiling at it, watching it happen before he stomps them 40-plus points. But the final game of the season with nothing on the line, Rodgers hangs 40.
Balls out at home.
Yeah, looks
off
like
the field
vintage
with the American
MVP
flag.
Rodgers, right?
Yeah.
Ends the game, taking the accolades of the crowd.
I could see it, man. I mean, it also could be his last NFL game.
Could be.
Right?
I feel like earlier this season,
I think people are talking about that a lot because they just assume he's coming back.
Well, earlier in the season, I thought that it might be a case where the league was done with him before he was done with the league. He might want to come back, but I was struggling to find spots that would be at all interested in that. The way the sort of back half of the season has gone, though, and the sort of dynamic, teams taking themselves out of draft position, I feel like there's going to be a team like the Raiders from last year who just didn't get one, right? Somebody's going to find themselves in June without an answer at quarterback, and Rodgers is going to be at the end of the phone, and you're going to be like, okay, fine.
Yeah, just to recap, and the reason why we highlighted the Raiders so much, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, Sam, there's 32 NFL teams.
Right.
At that, right?
Correct.
We're the 33rd team.
It's true.
But there's 32 NFL teams.
Yes.
The Raiders were the only team that I would say truly went into the season with a bridge quarterback or a
without an answer at quarterback.
With no long-term answer, right?
Yeah.
Every other team, even the Titans, had a year two hope
Yeah.
For a guy that was drafted round 1 or 2, or they had a veteran, or in Minnesota's case, they had a first rounder and a bridge, right? But the Raiders were the only team. On paper right now, there's 7 or 8 teams that might be in that boat.
And only theoretically 2 first-round quarterbacks that are going to, fill those spots.
And only a couple. Yeah,
you got the Darnold dynamic, like that's an extra one, but there's less quarterbacks than there are quarterback spots, is my point.
To the point where our friend Dan Brugler's talking about Penn State quarterback Drew Aller, who's already said, hey, I'm going back to Penn State, and Dane being like, well, scouts are kind of maybe thinking he could change his mind because he'd be the third surefire first-round pick because some scarcity there as far as QBs go. So, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic for Rodgers, but because it's Week 18, I want to at least bring up the point that this could be the last game of his Hall of Fame career. Who knows if he's ready to call it quits. It does seem like he doesn't want to go out on this sour note and has enough confidence that he can come back and play. So
I can't imagine you would want to go out like this. Anybody, And all these guys generally, the tendency is to stay too long at the fair rather than go home early enough to get out when you're still on top. I think it's very few quarterbacks that are able to sort of correctly gauge when they are on the way out. So I would imagine Rodgers would absolutely want to come back and try and go out on a better note than this. But it's like, how many teams are going to be interested in that? But it does feel like the kind of game where he might just one last reminder, Hey, I can still play.
Yeah, I could see it. I could see that. From a Miami perspective, of course, I think they're better with Tua. He's played pretty well against the Jets his last couple times out after struggling against them earlier on in his career. But Snoop Hundley did play well last week. The back that was is that the first good backup game from Miami? Like Skylar Thompson did show flashes. I remember Skylar Thompson had a nice little run against Buffalo in the playoff game, but that was also like he was throwing the ball to the defense, making big time plays, whatever. Snoop Hundley with one of the cleanest games we've seen from a Mike McDaniel's backup here.
I would say that's the best backup performance Mike McDaniel's gotten out of a quarterback. I mean, Skylar Thompson had a game last year where he looked okay. They've had flashes, but that I think is probably the first sort of decent game they've gotten out of a backup, which is itself a pretty bad indictment.
And that was using his legs, you know, just not missing a ton of passes. If he plays like that again, I think Miami's fine. But clearly they're better with Tua running the show. So that's going to be a big factor here. All right, man. Make a pick.
I will as soon as there you go. The Jets. I'm buying into my own narrative that Aaron Rodgers will randomly show up once this season.
You convinced me as well.
There you go.
Give me the Jets here. I lost my. I'm going to move the ad read because I lost the document.
Yeah. Okay. Seems like a fair reason to do it.
Guys, I'm pushing it. I'm pushing it after the Buffalo-New England game. Don't kill me.
Bumping it.
Buffalo Bills at the New England Patriots. The Bills are still favored by 2.5. Josh Allen's going to get the start, though. Josh Allen's going to get the start over under 38.5 per FanDuel. 13-3 Bills, who have the number 2 seed clinched. They're going to play as many backups as possible. But Josh Allen has a starting streak that they want to keep alive. And so he's going to start and then leave.
Yeah. Do we think, is this going to be one snap and then out?
I'm going to say it's short-sighted.
The Vikings did that one time with Randy Moss where he had a start streak going and had a hamstring injury. So they put him out for one snap with a bum hamstring just to keep the streak alive and then realized, you know what, actually he's going to need to be shut down for several weeks.
That's stupid.
This is interesting, though, where, Buffalo's going to be resting players, but all of a sudden, like the Patriots with the number 1 overall pick, as things currently stand, it's like Joe Milton's going to be active, and we might actually not be playing our starters.
There's rumblings about Joe Milton being out there.
So I don't know how much the Patriots are going to be playing their starters.
How does the NFL police that? Because they were trying to police the Dolphins tanking and going through emails like, are you trying to lose and this and that? Like, does anything say you're not going to lose more than like my healthy starting quarterback's not going to play?
Right. The third string we're going to make active and put him in the starter.
But you could also make the case, we're just trying to see what we got from this late round rookie who's got a cannon for an arm. Like, you could make that case. Drake May's pinball. We don't want him getting another head injury heading into the offseason. We want to go out on a positive note. We just lost by 100, and we want that to be the last thing. Yeah,
there's no way of doing it.
It's a tough sell.
There's in other leagues, soccer, I think is the same thing. There's some sort of rule that you basically can't field an entire team worth of like the youth team, right? But again, it's like, where do you draw the line between this is squad rotation, this is, whatever the NBA term is, like what's the injury management or that term that they don't play because they don't want to get him hurt. Like, how do you juggle that versus he's actually making a mockery of the game right now? How do you police they are intentionally tanking by starting a bunch of backups versus it's a legitimate way of exploring your roster?
And to be clear, what would be on the line here, if New England had the number 1 overall pick, you're potentially talking about this game equaling an extra number 1 overall pick, right? You're talking about holding the cards in the draft where QB needy teams are going to fight to move up, presumably, even if we don't love the quarterback class. And that might lead to a 2026 first rounder and an extra. Like, this game itself for the New England Patriots, just like the Giants game. The Giants game may have cost them a quarterback option. Mm-hmm. This New England game could cost them an extra first and a second round pick. Like, that level of haul for teams to come up from 2 to 1, from 3 to 1 to whatever it might be.
Or even further down. I mean, yeah.
Like, or further down, right? So you're talking multiple very valuable draft picks on the line this week for the New England Patriots. So I don't blame them if they throw Joe Milton out there and they call 900 run plays in a row or whatever it is to just kind of, not score.
Again, go back a few years. The Eagles did that to sort of stay at whatever it was, number 6 overall, right? Just to make sure they stayed in that kind of area. The Patriots currently occupy the 1st overall pick, literally the most valuable draft pick, and winning would take them out of that spot. So it makes perfect sense for them to not try that hard in this game.
So there's not much else to watch here. So here's the short-sighted nature of the Josh Allen starting streak, because we're stat people here, right? So you're going to go to like Pro Football Reference or whatever.
Yeah.
And so Josh Allen's starting and playing a SNA series or whatever to keep a starting streak intact. It's going to ruin yards per game average. It's going to ruin all his per game averages. It's going to ruin 10 years from now when they're like, how many points per game do the Bills average when Josh Allen starts? Well, they scored 3 against New England when Mitch Trubisky came in and all the backups. It's going to ruin all of that. It's going to ruin all the other stats just to keep a starting streak intact. It's short-sighted by the Bills.
It's only going to ruin the stats that people don't pay attention to, though, because the ones where it's like a single game performance, usually they have a attempts cutoff. This is the first time a quarterback is thrown for X using Y. But it's like minimum of 20 attempts.
And because Pro Football Reference is the only place that keeps track of QB's wins and losses, and they don't do it the right way. They don't do it the way baseball does, right? Like, Josh Allen should start and he leaves at 0-0. It's Mitch Trubisky's game. He's the pitcher of record. He's the QB of record. Like, if you really want to keep tracks of wins and losses, do it the right way. This is going to go on Josh Allen's permanent record. Wins and losses, winning percentage. All of these stats are going to Josh Allen just so we can keep a starting streak alive.
Well,
it's short-sighted, Sam.
Clearly, Josh Allen trusts Bisky to keep his win-loss record intact.
I mean, it goes
he
the
has
other
full
way.
faith in the Bisky.
If Bisky puts up 50, all of a sudden Josh Allen's points per game and his start and his winning percentage all goes up.
And his MVP case goes down.
Like, Zach Wilson earned Aaron Rodgers a QB win last year into that ridiculous system. Anyway, that's what's on the line in this game.
Which is to say almost nothing.
The thing to watch in this game is if Joe Milton plays, does he throw the ball 80 yards? That's always a potential in the cards play.
And what his average depth of target is?
Yeah.
18.
Yeah, Joe Milton. I mean, if Drake May plays, he's fun to watch. So
yeah,
reasons to watch. That's it. Let's pick
Buffalo. Buffalo's backups.
Buffalo's backups. Yeah, I'll also go Buffalo. Harry must have been looking at these lines like, Buffalo's not.
This is what I'm saying. You didn't give him the necessary context to make this is
not yet.
I feel like this is slightly sinister for me.
We're all taking Buffalo. All right, some of these games don't have a lot to talk about, so we'll go quick. Houston Texans at the Tennessee Titans. Texans favored by 1.5 here at Tennessee.
This is one I think that's been moving.
Texans are already locked into the number 4 seed here.
Yeah. They don't have much to play for and probably would like the rest in terms of trying to reset to some degree. Tennessee also doesn't have much to play for, but for different reasons. I mean, they've put themselves in this position where they're now the 2 pick in the draft. Like, they've banked into this top spot, having looked like they were going to win enough games to keep themselves out of a shot at a quarterback. All of a sudden, they sit at number 2, and they probably don't want to win a game either.
So if you're Houston, do you say, well, I don't want Tennessee to have their pick of the quarterbacks. I want them to pay extra draft capital to go get it or whatever it might be. So that's the only long-term motivation. But clearly, Houston's got to care more about the playoffs. They're hosting a game the following week. They got to stay healthy for that.
Well, this was the logic with Philadelphia as well. Like, do you could rest your starters this final week. On the other hand, do you want the Giants to get their draft pick? Now, the Giants seem to have done that themselves, but yeah, there's weird situations with these division games at the end where like one division team might be motivated to stop the other division team getting a good draft pick.
I mean, that would involve Houston losing, of course, though. So that's
right.
Like, does Houston tank?
I mean, they're both, again, it's another game where each team is kind of motivated not to win the game. Like the Houston Texans, not so much to intentionally lose the game, but they don't want to be starting people because they're banged up and they have nothing to play for. The Titans have found themselves in a position where they're number 2 overall right now, and they don't want to win because that could drop them to 5, 6, or whatever. Even worse. So neither team wants to win this game again.
Neither team wants to win. There's nothing else to talk about.
That's problematic, I think. Now we've got, 3+ games so far where neither team actually wants to win.
Some of our Houston fan friends, though, they get I don't know the exact history of obviously the Houston Oilers left and went to Tennessee, became the Tennessee Oilers for a couple of years before becoming the Titans. And there's been a battle over the retro uniforms and what those mean and who owns them and what they represent. The Titans are wearing the throwbacks, I think. Changed their logo this week. Mm-hmm. Sensitive issue between the two franchises. So there's that dynamic as well. I think they did that last year, didn't they? In this game. So the Tennessee Titans are throwing back to the Houston Oilers jerseys. Yeah. Which just brings even more confusion to the table here.
Well, particularly with neither team wanting to win the game.
Houston versus Houston, nobody wants to win. All right, make a pick.
I'm going with Tennessee for no good reason because neither team wants to win.
Tennessee, they're going to lose by 1 because they're getting 1.5.
Okay.
I'll take Tennessee as well. We're agreeing too much. It's not good for you. Another meaningless game. Jacksonville Jaguars at the Indianapolis Colts. Colts favored by 4.5.
This feels particularly bad for that this year. Are there normally this many games that nobody cares about?
For Week 18?
Yeah.
We have a couple more here.
Does Indianapolis want to win now that they've just been embarrassed by Pat McAfee?
I mean, that's why they want to win, yeah. But they have a chance to screw Jacksonville out of draft position as well.
Yeah, though
it's not as important.
Yeah, the Jags at least already have a quarterback, and it's not as significant, theoretically.
What was the year? There was the one year, I think 2011, these two teams played, and the loser got Andrew Luck. And the Colts obviously lost.
Right.
That was the year Peyton Manning was hurt. Colts were awful. They lose, and they get Andrew Luck, and the Jags didn't.
Yeah. Well, the Colts.
Well, the Jags had just drafted Blaine Gabbert, and he was
so
also.
They had their guy.
So they had their guy. He was also bad enough that they still would have taken Andrew Luck, right? So they would have been the first team to go do the Josh Rosen, Kyler Murray thing.
Well,
or the next team. Or
you wonder. That would have been a fascinating decision to make. The Colts, though, had it locked up because I think wasn't Scott Tolzien their starting quarterback for basically the whole year without.
It was Dan O and Curtis Painter, I think.
Curtis Painter, that's it.
Yeah.
Curtis Painter's the guy I was thinking of. But they basically decided we're going to roll with Curtis Painter for the year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They did a good job to get Andrew Luck and transition there.
Right.
So this is like, you got to get back on Pat McAfee's in his good graces. Play hard, finish out the string here.
I mean, they have to, I think, try and respond to that. You can't just roll over and go into the season off the back of another loss, having just been absolutely eviscerated by a guy like McAfee publicly, calling into question the very professionalism of your entire organization. I do think that would be bad. Like they do want some kind of response. So I guess by that standard, the Colts have more to play for in this game than Jacksonville, who don't have a ton. They don't have a ton to play for, but they also feel like a team that isn't intentionally trying to lose the game. Like they at least want to show good going into the offseason. So both teams are slightly motivated to play in this game.
All right, let's make picks and move on.
The Colts, I believe, are more motivated. Therefore, they will cover.
Yeah, this will be good because we'll get some analysis on how much does, like if they drop 40 here.
How much does McAfee move the needle?
You think I'm joking, but if they come out and play hard, you don't think Jim Irsay is going to be like, my guys respond. Pat McAfee. I'm telling you, Pat McAfee's the next GM of the Indianapolis Colts.
Do you think he could do both? Could he be GM and run a daily show?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes.
Like the way you were going to be.
I don't want anything like I have so much respect for Pat McAfee. So anytime I mention his name,
right,
and if it's in jest or whatever, I don't want anyone to misconstrue that. The fact that he has created a career as a punter, as a media person, as a wrestler, and not just a media person, but
Empire,
full sports show, Empire, college game day, flies around the country, does all these, wrestling broadcaster, wrestler extraordinaire, wrestling at WrestleMania. Unbelievable.
Dude's legitimately living the dream.
There was a one of the old wrestling podcasts I was listening to with Jim Ross. I think he was thrown back to, there was a point in the late 80s where a guy was the president of the Braves and the Falcons at the same time or something, or the Braves and the Hawks in Atlanta, and was essentially de facto GM of both teams, which like blew my mind. Could you imagine? Could you imagine today someone being the general manager of two professional sports teams, completely different salary cap situations, all these different things, but maybe back then they could do it? Blew my mind, right? Pat McAfee, if he just like tacked on GM of the Colts, I think he could do it.
Well, that's
I wouldn't
like,
be surprised.
That's like that guy I was telling you about where, everyone from the 30s and the 40s had great names, great nicknames. There was a guy called Shipwreck Kelly.
Yeah.
And Shipwreck Kelly, I think at one point was like the player, GM, and owner maybe of the Brooklyn Dodgers back when they were a football team. That was pretty impressive. Like, just, I'm going to do it all. Like, he led the team in receiving at the same time as owning it and being a GM. And
Pat McAfee's the Shipwreck
players.
Kelly of his day.
There you go.
And I mean, we've send that clip to Pat. He's the Shipwreck Kelly. See what he thinks.
Yeah,
I think he could do it. So this is if the Colts play well, I'm just telling you, if they play well this week, something's going to go on in Irsay's brain that says, this guy, motivational speech. We got a good game out of our guys. Maybe there's something there.
Well, this is like, you were going to be the GM of the Jets with the stipulation that this show had to still exist. Like, you could do that on the side.
I would do it.
But I wonder, would McAfee, okay, I'll be your GM, but I still got to keep doing my program.
Yeah, he'd keep the program. Like, what would he might have to give up doing SmackDown or something. But he could still do it. I think he could do it. I think he could do it all. I think he's got at least 2 more jobs he can add to the mix and pull it off.
In this world, it's all digital anyway, right? Like, I'm on the end of the phone. I don't need to be there.
Don't need to be there.
If you need me, pick up the phone. I'm here.
But he lives in Indy. He's still there.
Right, but like he's on his own location set doing whatever, right? It's like, look, if something comes up in the building, I'll pick up the phone, right? I might be interviewing Nick Saban at the time, but I'll pick up the phone and we'll talk through it.
So that's what we're going to watch for in this one is, does Indy respond to Pat McAfee?
Right.
We're all going to take the Colts here.
Yeah.
In Vegas, we're going to be there. Los Angeles Chargers at the Las Vegas Raiders. Not going to be at the game, but we'll be at Circa. The Chargers favored by 4.5 here in this game Sunday at 4:25. Chargers will already know what they're locked into. If Pittsburgh wins, they'll be the 5, and the Chargers will be locked into the 6. If Pittsburgh loses, then the Chargers could be playing for the number 5 seed here. Right. So this is pretty significant.
So it could mean nothing for them.
Yeah. So this is the difference between the Harbaugh again or going to Houston. And I think, again, everybody would choose going to Houston the way they're playing at this point.
I feel like Jim Harbaugh is the type of coach that's not resting people either way. Like, even if they find out they're not playing for anything, they're still, like, he's Dan Campbelling this thing. He's like, no, we're playing hard, boys. We're going in on the right note. He's not going like, we don't have anything to play for anymore. Everyone's sitting.
That's a good point.
Like, he's sending out Justin Herbert with his 17 injuries and saying, dude, this is a game like any other. Suck it up and get out there, and giving him the hits on the shoulder pads before he goes. He's not being like, Justin, good news, sir. We're not playing for anything. It's time to get in the cotton wool.
I think the other funny aspect of this is, like, if the Raiders win, they could be picking 10. Like, how good of a draft
how
pick
bad
the
can
Raiders
they screw
are?
themselves in the last 3 weeks of the season?
Can they go from a top 2 pick to, like, 10th?
They were in a situation where if they had lost out, they would have been the number 1 overall pick. They've gone from theoretically the number 1 pick to, if they won this game, who has the tiebreaker over them in New Orleans? But they're picking at least 10, if not 11. That's a catastrophe for a team that hasn't been able to find a quarterback for the last 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it is. And
that would be quite funny.
I think it would be funny. Aaron Rodgers going to the Raiders.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, something like that is going to end up happening because the Raiders have taken themselves out of position to draft a quarterback.
And then on one hand, you could say for the second straight year, the Raiders are playing hard late and this and that, but they just beat the Giants and the Saints. So,
and even playing hard has only gotten them to 4, maybe 5 wins. So it's like, you know.
Is that who they beat? Was it the Giants? Did I make that up?
Did I make that up?
So yeah, let me double check what I just said.
Jacksonville,
that's what I meant. Yeah. Either way, two teams battling for the top picks. They just beat the Jaguars and the Saints. Those are their 2 wins, their first 2 wins since week 4 against the Browns. Actually, when you start adding this up, they've beaten the Browns, Jags, and Saints, all teams picking in the top 10. And they also beat the Ravens, of course, back in week 2.
Then they're one of the few weeks. This is why week 1 and 2 analysis is always ridiculous because you've got the Bengals losing to the Patriots, who look like the worst team in football. And then in week 2, you have the Raiders beating the Ravens, who right now look like the best team in football, or one of them. Neither of those games makes any damn sense.
We should just skip them. They should be our bye weeks.
We're back in week 3. Week 3 is the earliest we can possibly tell you anything of substance because the first 2 weeks are meaningless.
It'd be bad because our numbers are highest in weeks 1 and 2. We should probably work those weeks. All right, we'll be in Vegas. That's the only other connection here.
That's true. We will be.
But not at the game, as we said. We'll be at Circa, hanging out, watching this game. Anything else to watch for before we pick? Let's just move. Move.
I mean, last week was a sort of bounce-back performance from the Chargers' defense. Can they maintain that against Aiden O'Connell, who's stubbornly trying to win games and show that he could be a quarterback in the NFL? That's about it.
I was asked this morning, are there any both conferences feel top-heavy, right? If you said a top 3 in the NFC, top 3 in the AFC, I think we'd all come to the same conclusion. But is there a team that can do some damage? I said maybe the Chargers, right? The way they play defense, the way Herbert can get hot, could they be the team that upsets a Baltimore, a Buffalo, a Kansas City along the way? I think they're
I've
most likely.
I've lost some faith in the Steelers over the last few weeks, but I think the Chargers are dangerous in the playoffs. I think the Broncos are dangerous in the playoffs. They're certainly a tier down from the top contenders, but if either one of those teams upset somebody, it wouldn't shock me. And if the Bengals somehow snuck in, obviously with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, et cetera, they're dangerous, even defense notwithstanding. So there's definitely a hierarchy, but I think there are some live, underdogs in the AFC.
All right, man. Make a pick.
Chargers to win and cover.
I think I'll take the Raiders for no reason.
Nah.
Who cares at this point?
Because who cares?
I mean, just based off, they're going to play hard for Antonio Pierce.
Take the Raiders because who cares?
Aiden O'Connell gets hot. All right, got to tell you about our friends over at Harry's. Got this one. Got to tell you about our friends at Harry's, where the holiday season's over, but Harry's still has a great deal for you for all of their products. Love their products. I'm going to bring the razor on the road.
Right? On the road
when we go, because I need that nice, really smooth shave that Harry's brings to the table. Loved using it the entire month of November when I had to shave my entire face. Now, neck, everything, get it nice and smooth. Mm-hmm. Harry's takes care of that with their German-engineered blades made in their own factory that stay sharp longer. They've got customizable delivery options for scheduled refills for as low as $2. That's half what you pay for the other big brands. And you get a 5-blade razor, weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover for just $3 over at harrys.com/checkthemic. So get the edge on your shave with Harry's. Get started with a $13 trial set. That's right, $13 for just $3 at harrys.com/checkthemic. That's harrys.com/checkthemic for a $3 trial set. San Francisco 49ers at the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals are favored by 4.5 here. Brock Purdy probably hurt for this game, out for this game. 7-9 Cardinals against the 6-10 49ers. Battle for last place in the NFC West.
Yeah. Another game where theoretically neither team cares, but is more of the Jacksonville bent, where I think both of them are kind of going to be trying to play, with the exception of the fact the 49ers are shutting down anybody that's hurt. So Brock Purdy probably not playing. Nick Bosa, I mean, would you play him? He's probably getting shut down as well, right? So
yeah. Niners are sitting here with the number 11 pick. I don't know how much higher that can go, but maybe they could leapfrog New Orleans to number 10. I don't know what the tiebreaker looks like. That seems like...
Yeah, they're fairly locked in to that
But
spot.
I'm just saying, the San Francisco 49ers, who I think are going to be good next year, going out on a limb. I think they're going to bounce back and be good, or sitting here with the top 10 or 11 pick in this draft. That's going to be an interesting dynamic this offseason.
Yeah, it's a shame from their perspective that it's not like last year where like 6 of those top picks are going to be quarterbacks.
Yeah,
you can have we were talking about the Chargers having effectively the number 1 pick in the draft last year because all the picks before them were going to be quarterbacks. Like that could have been San Francisco this year if it was a different quarterback class. But yeah, it's still a great situation where effectively what you believe to be a very sound fundamental team is going to have quite a high draft pick because of the season that they've just had.
Arizona's at 14. Looks like they might be able to get up to 10 or 11. Again, I don't have all the tiebreakers off the top of my head here, but they could move up a little bit with a loss.
Yeah, I feel like this is a game where Arizona's just less beat up, so they're probably going to have a better chance in this game. San Francisco showed last week like they're still good, they're still dangerous, they're still capable of putting up a ton of points, but they're probably not going to have Brock Purdy. They've already shut down Trent Williams. I would imagine you'd shut down Nick Bosa given the injuries he's trying to play through, whereas Arizona's reasonably healthy by comparison.
That's about it, right?
Yeah.
All right. Make a pick.
Arizona.
I'll also take Arizona. Harry's going to take Arizona, cover the 4.5 at home in the meaningless game. New York Giants at the Philadelphia Eagles. We'll get to some good games in a minute. We got to talk about all of them, though. 3-13 Giants, 13-3 Eagles. Eagles favored by 2.5. We did have the opportunity for the very hilarious Saquon Barkley breaks the rushing record against the Giants, but he will not be playing. Eagles resting up for the playoffs. That's how they do it. Organizationally, just like Kansas City, rest, get ready for the run for the championship. That's what they're weighing, so that's what's going to happen.
Yeah. I think at one point Sirianni said that he was essentially going to have to he was going to consult on this. It wasn't just going to be a unilateral decision. He was going to talk to the locker room, talk to everybody effectively before they made the call, and then made the call. And it's like, yeah, I mean, he's an important player for us. We have nothing to play for. We're locked into the 2. Therefore, we are resting Saquon Barkley. Which, I mean, that's the right answer, right? Like,
yes.
Why would you risking Saquon Barkley for him to try and get the rushing record is insane. Relative to the downside that if you get Saquon Barkley hurt, if you believe in anything like the MVP conversation, you're risking one of the most valuable players in the NFL for nothing other than a personal record.
There's hurt plus just a week off at this time of the season.
Right, for a running back. For a guy that gets beat up every week.
Over 300 carries, which is, a massive workload these days. That's huge. So I think it's smart by Philly. And then that other dynamic that you're saying, like if Philly loses this game, it screws the Giants even more from a draft position perspective.
They're motivated. They're doubly motivated to play that way, to rest everybody.
And I think the Giants are still going to – they played hard last week. There's no reason they're not going to play hard this week and try to win. So there is a chance that the Giants, who are currently picking 4th, I mean, they could drop – I don't – again, there's –
they could do the Raiders.
They have 3 wins.
Yep.
There's 5 teams that have 4 wins. If they jump into that 4-win mix, like those teams are picking between 5 and 9. I don't know, again, the tiebreakers on all that, but could they be picking 7th, 8th, 9th? That's all possible now for the Giants.
Yeah, I haven't checked where they stand tiebreaker-wise relative to the 4-win teams, but they have the worst, obviously, tiebreaker record of the 3-win teams, and they can't jump them. Like, there's nothing that can happen in the final week of the season if they finish on the same record as Cleveland, Tennessee, and New England that can take the Giants higher. Like they need those other teams to win in order for them to move higher in this draft spot. So again, in what is seen as a 2-quarterback draft, and the Giants, do they like Shedeur? Do they like Cam Ward? At the moment, they're not in position to take either of those guys.
The second thing, and I, for fear of talking about this without full knowledge of how to handle it, second week in a row, Jalen Hurts is still in concussion protocol. Mm-hmm. Had the concussion 2 weeks ago. So I don't even know if he would be playing if this was a playoff game. How do you what are your thoughts on that? Do you have any because there are Tua has been the most well-known concussion case over the last couple of years. We've seen it. It's been in big games, and we know very specifically like when he misses time, but there's also like Jaquan Brisker, the safety for the Bears, had a concussion in early October and didn't play the rest of the season.
Right.
Tua, we thought, might retire, and he missed 4 or 5 weeks. Is this concerning that Hurts is in protocol for the second straight week, where a lot of guys do get out of it within the first 7 days?
Usually, in fact. There was somebody, it was Malik Neighbors missed more than a week when he had that one where his head smacked off the turf trying to catch the ball.
Yeah.
And that lasted a week longer, maybe 2 weeks longer than people were expecting it to. It's interesting. So Tua obviously is like the poster child for the concussion stuff because of all of his concussions. But Tua generally, like when he's been shut down long term, it's been the Dolphins shutting him down as opposed to him struggling to get out of the protocol. Like he's generally, I think, gotten out of the protocol pretty quickly. And they've said, no, look, dude, look at the video. Like we're going to shut you down for a month, right? Because I mean, who knows how much of that is a PR thing as opposed to anything else, but they have shut him down. It's not that he's had lingering effects that he hasn't been able to clear, but this is the first year I can think of where there's been a bunch of these now where Brisker's the most obvious example. Chris Olave is another one. And then guys like Neighbors that have lasted a little longer than usual. But these guys that have actually struggled to clear the protocols, to pass the various hurdles that you need in order to get cleared to get back on the field again. It is interesting. And this, because it's a meaningless game, it means they don't need to answer those questions. Like if he is struggling to get out of the protocol, nobody's going to ask about it because...
Has protocol changed through the years? Have they made it more difficult?
Yeah.
Because that hasn't been reported on. Maybe it would never get reported on. Sometimes that just happens, right? Like, hey, we've got better protocols now.
Right.
And maybe they're stricter or whatever it is. But on the surface, you're right. It does seem like it's taken, instead of the 1 week, it's taken.
I mean, certainly the Brisker and the Olave situations where guys have been like, because I've seen this happen in other sports where guys have felt lingering symptoms, weeks after the initial concussion, and the eventual decision has been taken to sort of shut them down for a long period of time. And then they come back and, all's good or whatever. This is sort of the first situation I can think of, or the first time where I can think of it happening in the NFL, where guys have not been able to get out of the protocol after a bad concussion.
Just something to keep an eye on because Philly's got to play next week, obviously, and in round one they're hosting a playoff game.
And, Kenny Pickett is dealing with broken ribs.
Right.
And, Tanner McKee had to come in last week and played well, et cetera. But, it's an interesting dynamic where Philly's starting quarterback is at least an unknown right now coming off concussion. Their backup quarterback is dealing with broken ribs where they said he could have gone back out, but, who knows how he's playing with broken ribs even if he has to go out. And then Tanner McKee, it doesn't take – we're very close to Tanner McKee starting a playoff game right now randomly, in the sort of like last week where all of a sudden late in the week Anthony Richardson's down, Tua's down, and totally different. We're very close to suddenly Philadelphia announcing that Tanner McKee's getting his first playoff start.
We are. All right, make a pick.
I'm flipping that. I had Philadelphia, but I'm changing the Giants because Philadelphia doesn't care, and the Giants do.
I'll take the Giants to cover the 2.5 here. Chicago Bears at the Green Bay Packers. Packers favored by 10.5 at home this weekend. They're still playing for some playoff positioning, right? Or does it not matter?
The Packers?
Yes.
I believe.
Oh, if Washington wins, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But they're all playing at the same time. So.
Right.
Yeah, so Green Bay's difference between playing Philly or the Rams, which you might think is significant, right? Going to Philadelphia versus going to L.A. to play the Rams.
Again, pending Philadelphia's quarterback situation, but sure. Theoretically, you would want to play the Rams more than you want to play the Eagles, I think.
Green Bay in an interesting spot here because I think when we were listing NFC teams, I'd always try to put them near the top tier, but then all of their losses are against all the top tier teams. Detroit a couple times, last week against Minnesota twice, Philadelphia, literally all against the top teams that are seeded or at least have better records than them, we should say. Yeah,
I mean, everybody that was vying for the number one seed, right? And last week is kind of the inverse of, we had this conversation yesterday, how damaging is it if Minnesota loses to Detroit? And the other contending team has beaten them twice this season. Does that sort of signify that they're not at that level? I mean, Green Bay had that loss last week to Minnesota, where they've now lost twice to the Vikings, who are still vying for that number one seed. They've lost to Detroit. They have had losses that indicate you're not quite at that level. If you'd won a couple of those games, maybe we would be having a different conversation and they'd still be in the one seed mix. As it is, all of a sudden, you've actually lost a few games and they're all to the best teams. The evidence kind of suggests that you're, top of the next tier, not actually in that true elite contender game. So from there, and this is from the outside, I don't know how much they're buying into that internally, but you would think they want to put out a statement and say, bounce back, stomp the Bears, and be like, no, we are a legit playoff team, and then go on that run again.
And it's a little different than last year because of those losses, right? Green Bay went in as the team nobody wants to play last year, and it was true. They were the number 7 seed, and 7 or 8 shows ago I misspoke, or someone misspoke, and maybe it was Nick Wright. It's his fault. Said that the 7 seeds had never won, and we kind of forgot. Hey, Green Bay did that last year as a 7 seed, went into Dallas, and whooped them pretty bad in the first round. So if Green Bay is the 7 seed this year, they'd be going to Philadelphia. If it's the 6, they're going to the Rams. So yeah, I think there's something to play for. Not that the Rams are easy, but I think on paper you could say you'd rather play the Rams than play the Eagles. So I think the Packers will play this one out, and then from Chicago's perspective, can they finally get a win at some point here to close out the season? Any sort of positive note? I mean, it's to the point where I think there's rumblings about Ryan Poles and the entire future with Chicago, not just the offseason head coaching show.
They have by far the longest loss streak in the NFL. They've lost 10 straight now. It started with the Hail Mary, right?
Yeah.
The Hail Mary happened, Tyreek Stevenson taunting the crowd while the play is happening behind him.
Remember, there was a point in the season where 6 weeks in, and every NFC North team had they were top 4 in point differential,
right?
Loaded powerhouse division, which is true, but Chicago was in that discussion for the first 6 weeks of the season.
And we're a play away from beating Washington, right? Had the Washington Commanders beaten until the Hail Mary happened, the Tyreek Stevenson taunting thing, he's the guy that gets his hand on it. It ends up landing in the hands of a receiver. And from that moment on, 10 straight losses for Chicago.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think they want to end on a positive note because I wasn't expecting to have Ryan Poles GM future discussions this offseason, but I think they're at that point as well.
Yeah, particularly once you fire Eberflus, right? We've identified the scapegoat. It's just they keep running, like they're running out of scapegoats. They keep losing, so we have to keep firing more people, and eventually you just run out of people to fire, and the only one left is Ryan Poles.
If you can't at least take advantage of the interim head coach bump,
right,
then that's a problem.
They also seem to have had this weird power struggle dynamic where, like, usually the GM is the guy, right, in the building. He's the one person essentially running the show.
Yeah.
And Ryan Poles seems to have kind of gotten gazumped within that building. And
Kevin
suddenly,
Warren, the president.
Yeah, and suddenly it's like the guy whose previous remit was just like arranging a stadium is now, I'll consult with Ryan when we hire the new guy. It's like, ooh. Ryan's job doesn't quite seem to be as not just as secure, but as wide-ranging as it was previously.
An interesting dynamic here. And Caleb Williams, always fun to watch, see how he finishes the season. Packers by 10.5 here, Sam.
We'll go with Green Bay. Wow, that's a big line, though.
Yeah, I'll take Chicago to keep it closer than that. And then now I want to tell you about our friends over at GameTime, which I was supposed to tell you earlier. But GameTime, that's where we get all of our tickets. If we were going to the Raiders game this weekend out in Vegas, I'd look it up on GameTime if we weren't leaving Circa. That's where I would go get all my tickets, no matter what I'm looking for. GameTime does a great job filtering out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. The curation makes it easier to save money on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever you're looking for. And then you just toggle the all-in pricing feature, which is awesome. It just shows the total up front. There are no surprise fees at checkout. Once you toggle that, you get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy it. And GameTime has a lowest price guarantee, or they will credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is also covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying all your tickets with GameTime. So download the GameTime app, create an account, use code CheckTheMic for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code CheckTheMic, CheckTheMic, for $20 off. Download GameTime today. What time is it? Game time. Washington Commanders at the Dallas Cowboys.
Ah, indeed.
That's next.
Washington does have stuff to play for.
11-5 Commanders, 7-9 Cowboys. Commanders favored by 4.5.
And the Dallas Cowboys, of course, are playing for Mike McCarthy. Fighting hard.
Aren't we all?
Down to the last snap.
So if Washington wins, they get the 6th seed. So they are playing for the right to go play the Rams.
Yeah.
Now, you could argue they just beat the Eagles a couple weeks ago. Maybe they don't care. They'll play the Eagles the 3rd time. But, yeah, you're playing for the 6th seed. If they lose, probably chance they're in the 7 seed if Green Bay wins.
Right.
But yeah, Washington's either a 6 or a 7.
Yes. And I do think that matters. Like, yeah, they show that they can beat Philadelphia, but I think they'd rather play the Rams given the option. So, like, I mean, I think that Philadelphia game was significant for them because they did show that they can beat teams like that. But yeah, I think this is one where both teams do want to win.
Yeah. I was so impressed with Washington, the way they played in the second half. Got screwed over not screwed over, but they got offense was out of rhythm based off some penalties and various things in the first half. Second half, just their lean on you type of style. It's a little Chiefs-like, the way the Chiefs have played this year, not the non-explosive. We're gonna grind it out, long drives, keep our defense off the field, keep your defense on the field. And I thought they did a great job wearing down Atlanta in the second half in that game. And look, they have explosives as well. We've seen Jaden Daniels throw a great deep ball and everything, but I think their grinded out style with their run game, short pass game, efficiency from Jaden Daniels, and the millionth time I've said this year, instead of him taking negative plays or throwing balls away, he'll pick up 7 on the ground as a scrambler. And then it also felt like Cliff Kingsbury started dialing it up, Sam. Started dialing it up, like wing T type of plays and some creative ways to run Jaden Daniels. It was almost like a break glass in case of emergency type of second half game plan, I felt like, from Washington, where they said, this is Jaden Daniels' show here. And we're going to drop back to throw with him, but we're also going to design a few more runs for him. And they did that. So I think Washington has, a few tricks for the playoffs that they could pull out, and I think they showed some of that against Atlanta.
I think they've completely dispelled the idea of the Kingsbury second half collapse, and
maybe it's just a Kyler Murray collapse.
Yeah, well
the way Arizona.
I think Kingsbury's also shown that evolution and an adaptation of his offense that had been a criticism or a question mark for a while in the last couple of years in Arizona. Like, things hadn't changed. All of a sudden, things have changed in this offense, including even Terry McLaurin is moving. They're not just lining him up at left wide receiver every single snap and saying, hey, go beat your guy. They are moving wide receivers around. That was always like the last bastion of defiance against modernization in that offense, and he's doing it. So, yeah, I think Kingsbury deserves a lot of credit. I think Jaden Daniels obviously deserves a lot of credit. And this Washington team, it hasn't hit a wall. It's still getting better, theoretically, on that side of the ball. And it's a fun offense to watch.
And then Dallas, obviously a disappointing season. We were just 1 week ago painting the picture like, hey, what if they beat Philly? What if they beat Washington? What would happen? They got smoked last week against Philly. It's just, I'm most surprised at what they used to dominate at home and demoralize teams and put up 40 and force turnovers, and they get all these defensive touchdowns. 5th lowest points per game at home this year. And it was an issue with Dak, right? It was with Dak taking on Detroit and other teams early, Saints. So this was a full year issue where they struggled at home. I don't know where the sun position is in early January.
That doesn't matter. It's gone.
It's gone.
Yeah.
It's just a fall issue.
Right.
But yeah, even just a weird season for Dallas overall, disappointing.
Well, last week I think was very damaging for them because they had sort of bounced back after getting some players back. Micah Parsons back in the lineup, Deron Bland, like their stars on defense were back, and they looked a lot better and a lot more formidable. And then the Eagles just steamrolled them, in that game. That's like, okay, they could have won out or at least been really good consecutively all the way towards the end. You would feel a lot better about this team, but to just get wrecked by a team like Philadelphia, again, the kind of class, the standard in the NFC, it sort of shows you this is a bigger problem than you just had a few injuries, and once everyone's healthy again, you're good. Like, they had a lot of people healthy on that defense, and they got annihilated.
I think they're going to play hard this week. Play hard for Mike. So that's the other. We'll talk plenty about the Cowboys this offseason. Last game under contract for Mike McCarthy, and seeing if they actually want to bring him back or look elsewhere. So it could be the end for the Mike McCarthy era for the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. On the one hand, I think I still stick by what I've said, which is Jerry Jones is kind of looking for a reason to give Mike McCarthy the job again. Like, that's his default position. On the other hand, I saw Nick Wright making this point that something big needs to change in Dallas, right? And really, it can only be Mike McCarthy. Like, you just gave Dak Prescott the giant contract. The GM, the personnel guy, is the owner, so that's not changing.
Oh, I agree.
Everything left is the head coach. Like,
Yeah.
that's the only big thing you can actually change if you're Dallas. So for that reason alone, you basically have to move on.
And you hear a lot of people around the league, Troy Aikman said it, other people have said it, like, hey, if Mike McCarthy doesn't go back to Dallas, he'll be a candidate for other coaching jobs. Maybe he takes another year off and comes back, but yeah, I don't think he's been a bad coach.
No.
I don't know if he's been a difference-making coach, on the positive end, but he's been good. He's been fine overall.
Yeah.
So,
but I think they've agreed.
But it might be time to change, because even if they had a first-round playoff exit, you would say,
that's the thing.
how do we get to that next step? And you might have to take a chance. And I'm not saying that's like, oh, go get Deion Sanders, but I think Jerry might need to take a chance here.
Even if you sort of park this season for a moment and say, look, if they had done anything other than winning a playoff game this year would have been enough to make you say, do we need to make a change? Because that would be, whatever it is, 4 straight years where you would like win 12 games and then lay an egg in the postseason. And it's like, we've clearly hit a level here and can't get any better. We need to make a change, some sort of fundamental change. And again, quarterback, GM, they're both locked in. So the coach is the only thing we can change. So even if you just said, if they just didn't improve on last year, we would be thinking we need to make a change. And they didn't improve. I mean, they got a lot worse. So you're sort of running out of ways where you can logically argue keeping him is the right move.
Remember, a few weeks ago, Dallas pulled the upset against Washington on the road. So Washington by 4.5 here. Where are you going?
I'm going with Washington.
I'll take Dallas, going out on a high note with Mike McCarthy,
Fighting
playing
hard for Mike.
Playing hard. Harry's going to take Washington here. We've got 4 games to discuss. This one doesn't matter. Seattle Seahawks at the Los Angeles Rams. Seahawks favored by 6.5 here on the road against the Rams, who just clinched the division last week. Seattle's going to finish in second in the West. Pretty good battle. Both of these teams had their ups and downs throughout the years, but Rams, unbelievable. 1-4 start to be at 10-6 right now, and to win the division.
I mean, that whole division was a wild ride this season. Like all 4 teams at some point were in first in the division, and the first time the Rams led the division was when they finally took it over at the end to win it.
Crazy. Yeah, and there was a point where we were just like, all right, Niners, like, you're the defending NFC champions, right? You got powerhouse team. When are you going to figure it out? When are you going to figure it out? They never did. It was a 2-week stretch, I think, where Arizona was sitting at first place in the middle of the season. Mm-hmm. And then it looked like Seattle was going to be in control. It's like, all right, Mike McDonald's defense, take some time, and we're going to figure it out. And we've come through this, and it was the Rams who came through and peaked at the end and found different ways to win, and winning with defense over the last few weeks in particular.
Yeah, 5 straight wins heading into this game. I mean, this was a team that was 0-2 and then 1-4 at the start of the season. 5 straight wins against some legit teams. I mean, they beat Buffalo 44-42 when the Bills looked like the best team in the NFL. They beat them. They beat Minnesota. Okay, we can argue whether or not the Lions were actually the root cause of that, but they beat Minnesota, and really the only thing standing between the Vikings and being the number 1 seed definitively in the NFC. So, like, this team has beaten some of the best teams in the NFL and is on a 5-game win streak heading into this game.
Matthew Stafford's not going to play. It's a Jimmy G game this week, so Jimmy Garoppolo will get the start for the Rams.
Will he make it through a game unscathed?
Yeah, who's the third string here?
Is it Stetson Bennett?
I was about to ask, is Stetson Bennett still over there? I apologize for not keeping up with where QB3
third string
is around,
quarterbacks,
because we don't have to talk about him much here.
That's true.
The mic.
Yeah, for some teams anyway.
For some teams.
Yeah.
Anything else on this one? There's not. I mean, look, we're just summarizing the season and talking about what's at stake. There's nothing at stake here.
Nothing's at stake in this game, but I think Seattle would like to go out on a good note, having been so close and then fallen out of the playoffs. They would particularly also like to beat the team that knocked them out of the playoffs, I'm sure. The Rams, resting Stafford, presumably some other people as well. You would assume that means Seattle wins reasonably comfortably.
Seattle currently has the best record for a non-playoff team in the NFL. 9-7. So they'd be picking 18th in the draft. The worst possible non-playoff team draft position. So that's something.
Yeah. Not
Congrats
a good
to the Seahawks.
Sure.
On that.
Hang the banner.
Seattle by 6.5. Where are you going to go?
Seattle.
I'll also take Seattle. Harry doesn't. He's taking the Rams. Harry's taking the Rams here. All right, let's talk NFC South here. Let's start with Carolina Panthers at the Atlanta Falcons. Falcons favored by 7.5. They had a golden opportunity Sunday night, had a chance to win, and they're in. They lose in overtime to the Washington Commanders. So now they're at a point where they need a lot of help, and a lot of help from Spencer Rattler's New Orleans Saints. So we'll talk about that game in a minute. But the Bucs are favored over the Saints by 13.5. Clearly, the Bucs, if they win and they're in. If New Orleans was to pull off the upset, though, this game gives the Falcons the chance to win and they're in. Both games happening at the same time, so they'll be playing this thing out. But Atlanta by 7.5 here against the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, really unfortunate loss for them against Washington. Like, they had a shot. They could have gotten it done. It would have been a huge game for them. I think this team looks better with Michael Penix at quarterback. Again, I think it's just a more honest representation of what they want to do. Like, it opens more things up. It's not that Kirk Cousins was a complete and total disaster. It's just that he is limited as a quarterback, and they can own. There's some things that just aren't on the table, and they're on the table with Michael Penix. Like, his arm is legit. He is much more mobile than Cousins, and they can run what they want to run. They can make the offense what it should be, not what it needs to be in order for Kirk Cousins to be viable. I think that makes it a better system. Like, it makes it a better offense overall. So I like Atlanta's offense to have success. Carolina's defense showed last week in particular that they're just a bad unit overall. They got hurt players, but they're also bad. They're not, it's one of the worst defenses in football. So you would expect the Falcons to have success on that side of the ball. And then it's kind of like, can Carolina and Bryce Young do enough to keep it close?
I don't know if I should. I got a tip. I didn't do this. This is someone else's research. I don't want to say who. Someone else's research, but I got a tip. I could have looked it up myself.
Okay.
But I'll just read it. Since the Panthers bye, Bryce Young, third in the league in ADOT, average depth of target.
Right.
First in big-time throws per PFF, and seventh in PFF passing grade. Right? There's a reason why we've been raving about Bryce Young.
Yeah.
But, yeah, last week they just depleted, man. They're depleted on really on both sides of the ball. So good finish to the season for Bryce Young, regardless of what happens in this game. So that's great. And then what you were saying about Michael Penix Jr. and this offense, the one thing I do I'm curious about, I love his aggressiveness, right? We said that with the Giants game. He is big play hunting. A couple times last week in particular, holding the ball too long, waiting, pressure's getting to him. And he was one of the great sack avoiders coming out of college. Again, with the nerds love the sack avoidance stats. Bro Nix was really good at it. Michael Penix Jr. really good at it. And so can he find that balance? I want him waiting for the deep out for Drake London. I've got Drake London's PrizePicks projection. I want him to feed Drake London. But can he find that balance between big play hunting down the field and when to hit the check down? That's the one thing, even in the preseason, we saw the check down timing, the check down feel, the check down accuracy, the short area accuracy for Michael Penix Jr. Hasn't necessarily been there. But he's another one of those rookies where I love the amnesia aspect of it. Like, he missed Drake London on what should have been the game-tying touchdown pass on third down.
Yeah.
And then comes back the next play and throws an absolute dot on 4th and 13 to Kyle Pitts. I love that. Bo Nix has done well with that. All the rookies, I think, have done great with bouncing back from adversity, which is a huge trait, I think, going forward for all those guys.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's been impressive for that reason, if nothing else. Going back to Bryce Young and the Panthers, Bryce Young, I think, has been really impressive since coming back and has generally gotten better. The offensive line, I think, has been pretty good all season long. I think one thing that's really concerning or not where you would want it to be is Xavier Legette has really not done much as a rookie, and he's actually been responsible for some of those big plays that Bryce Young has had not being completions, whether it's drops, whether it's letting the ball get stripped out of his hands. For a guy with his skill set, which is big, strong, fast, you have to be winning those contested catches. You have to be securing those deep shots when they go your way, and he hasn't been. Now, maybe this is just, he's a rookie, right? Sometimes these guys struggle, but if Xavier Legette had been a better performer down this stretch, I think it would be much more obvious that Bryce Young is playing like out of his mind good football, as opposed to just he's ticked up in the right direction. You can put a bunch more stats in Bryce Young's column if you simply have Xavier Legette making some plays that he hasn't made.
I mean, that's the other part of, I think, Bryce Young's development is, look, we said this about C.J. Stroud last year. Going into the season, Nico Collins wasn't a star. He developed into a star under C.J. Stroud, and I think Stroud deserves some credit for that, and also Nico Collins just started playing unbelievable. But C.J. Stroud went out there with a lot of unknowns, and they became knowns. And Bryce Young has gone out there with a lot of unknowns, or a known. David Moore is pretty well known. He's a wide receiver 4, like 6 years ago. And he's been feeding David Moore. And undrafted free agent rookie Jalen Coker has been a player. Who Bryce Young has been throwing to has been just as impressive. And again, it doesn't show up in the stats a lot, in part because of who he's throwing to. And I think ultimately when we get to draft day with Carolina, I know we've talked a ton about their pass rush, and they need a pass rusher, and it's a good draft for defensive linemen, and maybe they double up at that position, currently picking 6. But I think there's also a fair question if Tedoroa McMillan from Arizona is the receiver that you want to pair with Bryce Young, and if that's the way to go in the top 10. So and it also shows the lack of depth that Carolina has, that you probably need a big-time receiver and 2 big-time pass rushers as well. So they've got some work to do, but it's been impressive watching Bryce Young's development here the second half of the year.
Yeah, I mean, they're in, from comparison to last year, it's not good that Adam Thielen is still their best wide receiver. That's a problem. Now, maybe they will get sort of bailed out a little bit if Jalen Coker continues his impressive showing and becomes a player for them. But even if that's the state of play and Jalen Coker becomes something, Adam Thielen is sort of winding down in his career, Xavier Legette is a big pivot point there, or if he's not going to be the guy, you need someone else that is. You need that number 1 guy to come in and suddenly make the rest of the receiving core look a lot different.
So last week, Bucks were favored by 9.5 or whatever it was. It was a lot, and at this time we're like, man, I think it feels like Carolina not realizing completely all of the injuries that they had. No J.C. Horn, Chuba Hubbard, and others. This one's 7.5 against, again, a beat-up Carolina team. Where are you going to go with this one?
Well, I'm going to learn from last week's mistake and or overcorrect and say that Atlanta will win and cover.
Also overcorrecting here. I'll take Atlanta to cover. So the state of the NFC South, just to repeat from earlier, Atlanta needs this following game to go sideways. New Orleans Saints at the Tampa Bay Bucks. The Bucks are favored by 13.5. If they win, they're in. They win the NFC South for the 3rd straight year with a win here, and it's against Spencer Rattler's Saints, who have looked rough, to say the least, these last few weeks. But if the Saints were somehow to pull the upset, then Atlanta, they would get in with a win against Carolina. Bucks by 13.5 here, though. Over under 43.5 from our friends at FanDuel.
Yeah, the Saints that just lost fairly comfortably to the Raiders. So it's not, and
after maybe playing the worst game of the season on Monday Night Football against the Packers.
Yeah, and in their defense, it's not like this is a fully healthy Saints team with Spencer Rattler quarterback. It's like Spencer Rattler, in addition to all the other injuries they're dealing with. Nobody is healthy effectively with this team. We talked about Chris Olave being out with a concussion for a long period of time. Alvin Kamara was shut down, having been injured and battling through and trying to get to 1,000 rushing yards for the first time in his career. They're a banged up team. And obviously that's leaving them just not good.
We painted the picture that this could happen earlier in the year. Remember, the Bucks fell a couple games behind Atlanta and didn't have the tiebreaker, but we said, look, Tampa Bay's got the easiest schedule in the NFL over the second half of the year. And they did. And they took care of business with that. They beat they were 4-6 after losing to San Francisco. Then they go on bye, but they beat the Giants, Panthers, Raiders. Most impressive win against the Chargers, 40-17.
That's a big one.
It was a huge one, and a dominant game.
If it wasn't for that game, I think we would have real questions about what this team is. Because you'd be like, yeah, they've gone on this run. They've done what they needed to. They took care of business, and it's been emphatic. On the other hand, they are dominant wins against the Giants, Panthers, Raiders, and the Panthers again, and then the Saints, if they win this one, having lost to the Cowboys in the middle of that. And you're like, does anything there suggest that this team's actually any good? But in the middle of that is that absolutely dominant and emphatic win against the Chargers, where they control both sides of the ball. They put up a ton of points on what was the best defense in the NFL heading into that game, and they stopped the Chargers offense putting up a lot. So that's the one game in there where you're like, okay, that at least signifies they can do it against good teams,
right?
Even if they haven't for a lot of the season. Absent that, it has been beating up on a lot of bad football teams.
And then they had the tough one against Dallas on Sunday Night Football, had a chance to win. They fumble it away, but they came out firing last week. The offense was great. Baker Mayfield was outstanding. Again, the Panthers defense depleted, beat up, but Tampa Bay took care of business, put up 48 points. I expect them to do the same thing against the Saints. I took Mike Evans' PrizePicks projection. I think they're going to feed him, get him his 1,000. I think they're going to have their way with the Saints on offense, and I think, again, unless Rattler really plays above his level, I don't think the Saints have much of a chance in this one, which is why it's 13.5. And the one last thing I'll say, I'm not saying it's going to happen in this game, but crazy stuff happens in Week 18. I mean, it happens in every week in the NFL. But how many Week 18s have we gone into where we have a picture of draft position, we have a picture of who's going to the playoffs, and everything switches and everything does not go as planned? Like if Miami sneaks into the playoffs, like I'm not expecting Miami to go to the playoffs, right? What if they end up in? Or what if, New Orleans pulls an upset and Atlanta sneaks in as the NFC South champion? All of that stuff is on the table. So expect some sort of crazy this Week 18, but I'm not sure this is the game where it's going to happen.
No, I mean, it feels very unlikely. Like Tampa Bay still has something to play for in that, they lose, it opens the door for Atlanta. And the one thing we've seen from that run, how relevant that is to beating a team like Green Bay, if they have to go on the road or whoever it is that they're going to be playing, the Vikings, how relevant that run of beating up on bad teams is to being able to beat Minnesota or Detroit if they come to town in the first round of the playoffs is debatable. But what they have shown repeatedly is that against bad teams, they will absolutely destroy them. So the New Orleans Saints in their current iteration is a bad football team. You would therefore expect them to win handily. Yeah,
so again, if the Bucks win, like you just said, the loser of Lions-Vikings is coming to town.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tough team to play at home in Week 1. But look, I think what you said about the Chargers is correct. Tampa Bay can beat anyone, and they did beat the Lions back in Week 2. I thought that was a lot of the Lions beating themselves, but give credit to Tampa Bay. They did beat the Lions back in Week 2. I think I feel better about Tampa Bay upsetting one of those teams this year maybe than last year. I know they beat Philly in round 1 last week when Philly was just awful. And then they lose to the Lions in the divisional round. I feel like they, might be able to do some damage this year.
And they beat Philly this year as well, right? So they've got wins against Philadelphia, Detroit.
They did, yeah.
They gave Kansas City a pretty good game.
Yeah.
And the Chargers. So they have fought some good teams very well. I think they're definitely live. Like I said, if you didn't have those other data points, I think you'd be not concerned, but you'd have huge questions about whether this team is simply just, like last year's version of Dallas, right? Do they just beat up on bad teams and lose to good teams? But you do have that Chargers game in there. You do have the Lions game, the Eagles game. We do have evidence that this team can do it against really good teams as well, and they're going to need to because they're probably going to be hosting the 14-win loser from that number 1 seed showdown in the final game.
Baker, a lot of this comes down to Baker Mayfield. If you look at just his last few games, when he had, looking at PFF grades here, 90-plus grade against the Giants and 90-plus grade last week against the Panthers, no turnover-worthy plays in either of those games, didn't miss many throws. He's had multiple turnover-worthy plays, though, in the 4 games in between those, right? A Carolina game, Raiders, Chargers, Dallas. He will put the ball in harm's way at times. So a lot comes down to taking care of the ball, but if he plays like last week, man, they'll be good to go.
Yep.
Where are you going to go with this one?
Bucks to win and cover.
I'll do the same. Bucks win, cover, and take the NFC South. Harry's going to also take the Bucks. And it's going to be a great weekend, man. It's going to be great because we're over at Circa watching all these games. I'm just picturing it right now. We're sitting over at the sports book. Was it 8 1 o'clock games? 6 4 o'clock games?
In our booth.
Get that nice reserved for us to hang out, watch all the games. No better place to do it. So we're excited to be doing that over at Circa this weekend. And you guys can come join us too. We're getting in there on Friday because on Friday night we'll have a little meet and greet. You guys can join us. You could check the link in the description, circalasvegas.com/huddle up at Overhang. Choose the Los Angeles weekend because it's the Chargers coming into town this weekend. So come join us. We're excited to be sponsored by our friends over at Circa Resort and Casino. It's one of the premier destinations for all sports fans in Vegas. And excited to also check out Stadium Swim, Legacy Club, all sorts of great stuff over at Circa. So come see us on Friday night, and then if you're there Saturday or Sunday, you can come by and say hi as well. We'll be sitting there watching the 2 Saturday games. We're going to go live Saturday night after the games, and then more importantly, Sunday night after the games. Instead of Monday morning, we're just going to go right away. So as soon as Lions-Vikings ends, we're going to go live and recap everything that we saw for Week 18. That'll be your Week 18 Check the Mic review show.
Right. So if you're an audio listener, it will probably be up sometime late Sunday night. It won't. But the point is, it won't be. It'll be early for audio listeners. for
you'll
video.
get it earlier. It's a special treat, like British Isles listeners.
There you go.
We'll be getting it when they wake up.
And for YouTube viewers, it won't be out on that normal Monday morning time. It'll be early.
Yeah. So we're excited to be a part of Circa this weekend. So come join us Friday night. Check the link in the description. Final game. Final regular season game preview of the year. And it's a doozy. Vikings at the Lions. 2 14-2 teams. The stakes can't be higher for a regular season game. The number 1 seed is on the line. The winner gets it. The loser gets the number 5 seed. Also on the line here, our subscriber count.
Yeah.
Because we know there's more Lions fans coming in and Vikings fans loving listening to how good their teams are. But while you're here, if you could just click that subscribe button, that'd be great. Because we'll always talk about how good your teams are. All the time, I promise. Vikings and Lions, hit the subscribe button. Join us. Get that number to 100% of our viewers subscribed. Appreciate it. So Vikings-Lions, Sunday Night Football. Lions favored by 2.5 here. The over-under is 56.5. It's like a Big 12 game here, Sam.
Yep.
Old school Big 12, not new school Big 12. Old school Big 12 game here. They're expecting a shootout.
Yeah, and so are we, and so is everybody. Like our guests on yesterday's show, Tim Twentyman and Matthew Collar, they were each expecting a shootout. Everyone's expecting 30-plus points on both sides of the ball, like basically the last time. It was, 29-31 the last time they played? So same idea. I feel like it should be. I mean, there's no particularly good reason either one of these two teams should be able to stop the other one on offense. Even though Brian Flores' defense has definitely got some teeth, it's going to get up against the offense that has caused it the most trouble over the last couple of years. So, and that's the healthy side of the ball, Detroit's offense. Everybody's still pretty much intact on that side. So, yeah, I feel like fireworks.
Let's start with Detroit. When Detroit has the ball, right? We'll preview this like a playoff game. When Detroit has the ball. I was looking up the Jared Goff blitz numbers, as I did before last year's preview. Jared Goff against the blitz and Brian Flores when he's been with the Vikings. So these last couple of years, it was boggled my mind looking at some of these numbers. Because Flores has blitzed Jared Goff almost 70% of the time, on 70% of pass plays, almost. It's in the 60s. And Goff, against the blitz in the 3 games over the last 2 years, 58 of 71 for 685 yards, 4 touchdowns, no picks, 9.3 yards per attempt, and only sacked once. And we brought these stats up before last game, and I think the very first blitz, Minnesota got home and sacked Jared Goff. But that's the only sack in 3 games when blitzing, when sending the not just a 5th rusher, but just a second-level rusher. That's the blitz. So 121 passer rating and an 87.7 PFF grade for Jared Goff against the blitz. When he doesn't blitz, just 26 dropbacks, 17 of 26 for 199, 1 touchdown, no picks, and a PFF grade drops to 54. Now, these are small sample sizes and everything, but it's 3 straight games, and I know you'll say, hey, there's stylistically maybe the results were different, but 3 straight games, Brian Flores, who has blitzed the crap out of everybody in the league this year and had a lot of success, has blitzed Jared Goff at the same rate, if not higher, and gotten torched. Stylistically, maybe differently. Sometimes they got pressure and it still didn't work, and they didn't get it. Or sometimes Detroit picked it up and dudes were open. But man, Goff and the Lions have had answers to Brian Flores' blitz.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really interested in how they approach this game based off last game, because I do think that the last game, even though the result was the same, Detroit won, I feel like the dynamic was very different to last year. Last year, it felt like the Lions offense had the answers to anything Flores was throwing at it, and they weren't really pressured. Like, they were able to just, this is what you're doing, that's fine, we've unlocked the key. And it was like, it was late in the season when the Vikings defense generally felt like it was running out of smoke and mirrors, and they'd reached the end of how much Flores was able to do schematically to cover up from the inadequacies they had from a personnel standpoint. This year, I think they're much better from a personnel standpoint, and we haven't had indications really that same cheat code exists, or that the same wall is going to get hit where Flores runs out of ideas and he's no longer able to hide the deficiencies. Like, they still scare people on defense. And the first time they played this year, okay, Jared Goff still was able to put up a ton of points. The Lions offense put up a ton of points, and they won the game. So all of the outcomes are the same. But I felt like the way it played out in the game was very different to last year, where actually I thought Flores' defense dialed up a lot of stuff and caused problems and created pressure, and Goff just delivered anyway. And I'm really interested how they read that game, Minnesota. Like, does Flores look at that and say, if the same thing happens this time, it'll go our way this time? Like, Goff can't do that again. That was too absurd a performance in the face of pressure. If we simply dial up the same volume again, it'll go our way this time. Or does he look at that and say, well, last year they just torched us completely. This year, like, we had a better personnel group and they still torched us, so we're going to completely change the game plan and go against what we normally do. And this year, like, the Vikings are the heaviest blitz team in football. Like, they blitz 55% of the time, according to PFF. That's 5% more than Todd Bowles and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's the most in the NFL. Do they look at this and say, this is now 3 games straight that this offense has annihilated us when we blitz? We're going to go completely against our tendencies and drop everybody all the time.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, man. The other stat I wanted to pull out, our new friend of the show, Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? Co-worker over here. Nobody has more first downs against the blitz than Amon-Ra the last 2 years. 57 first downs. So they've got answers, man. And that's why I'm wondering. And the other dynamic here that nobody's going to be thinking about, nor should they, they could be playing again in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right? Because, as we said, the loser goes to Tampa Bay, and if they win in Tampa Bay, if it's a chalk NFC, then this is the divisional round matchup. Whoever wins gets the home game. But I would pose it then too. Like, if Flores doesn't come after Goff in this game, do they legitimately change it up, I guess is my question. And we're oversimplifying this, like blitz, no blitz, this and that. There's different types of blitzes. There's different styles. Like, obviously there's more nuance to this. But the game plan that this somewhat reminds me of, if you remember the playoff game where the Jets beat the Patriots back in 2010, a powerhouse Patriots team, Rex Ryan had gotten smoked against the Patriots late in the season. And who likes to blitz more than Rex Ryan? Maybe Brian Flores. That's it, right? No one else on the planet. And Rex Ryan sat there and rushed 4 and played coverage. And the Patriots didn't even game plan for the coverages that the Jets played, right? If the Lions are going to spend all their time expecting to have 60% blitz answers left and right, do you sit back and just play soft zone coverage and try to stop the run and make the Lions play a patient, grinded out game when they're itching to get those big plays, right? They're itching to get a trick play here and there. They're itching to get Jameson Williams behind the defense to free up Sam Laporta up the seam and make them play a patient game. I am fascinated to see if Brian Flores completely change, could go completely opposite in one game, just to see if that's going to work this time.
Yeah, but it's also like in this game where we're expecting it to be a shootout, and this is applicable to both sides of the ball, I think. Do you actually want to be dialing up a defense that is high variance, right? Because turnovers might be the most important thing in this game. Turnovers might be the thing that determines this game. So from Flores' point of view, do you actually want to do exactly the same thing as before, dial up the blitz, be aggressive, put everything on the line, and, okay, if it happens again, like Goff goes, 15 for 17 with a ridiculous performance, fair enough. On the other hand, if he puts 1 or 2 in harm's way, you could get 2 turnovers, and that changes the game in your favor.
Yeah.
Same with Detroit. We've been talking about that defense. Like, it's in trouble from a personnel standpoint, but Kirby Joseph has 9 interceptions. Like, those are the things that change games. It did against San Francisco. I wonder if Flores looks at that and say, actually, we want to keep this game high variance, like, because we think the turnover might be the thing that makes the difference.
That's what's fun about both of these defenses now, because if we go to the other side of the ball, Detroit, depleted defense, every metric has them as below average over the last few weeks after these injuries, but the turnovers.
Yeah.
Right? But Tim Twentyman mentioned the same team that we mentioned, the 2009 Saints, that was a high-powered offense and gave up all the yards but got turnovers. And it is, man, it's like kind of a strategy, but like one of those turnovers was all Brock Purdy, just straight up misses a throw and Kirby Joseph catches it. The second one, Kirby Joseph makes a great play. It's a lot to completely depend on the other team to do that, but Darnold's put the ball in harm's way a few times this year too. So both teams looking like, hey, maybe they're going to give up some yards, but hope that the variance goes their way when it comes to the turnovers.
Yeah, like obviously those are the types of turnovers that are not, you can't plan for that, right? Like all we're going to do is wait for the quarterback to pitch us one and then we get a turnover. So from that point of view, turnovers are sort of noisy, non-predictable, not really a game plan. But you can call defenses, you can call schemes that are more high variance and, are more boom and bust. And the bust is you give up a touchdown, you give up a big play, an explosive play, but the boom is you're more likely to get an interception in those plays. So you can skew your defense and what you're calling towards turnovers. It's just not without a cost. Like the cost is you also skew it towards giving up big plays as well. And that's a conscious decision. Do we want to be more conservative and, have a lower chance of a turnover, or do we want to be more aggressive, have a higher chance of a turnover, but also a higher chance of giving up big plays? I think both of these teams are at the moment skewed towards those turnovers and might be even more inclined to do it in this game where turnovers could be the determining factor.
Yeah, the last few weeks with Detroit, don't forget last year they go to the NFC Championship, but their defense was a weakness, but there was a lot of, the game flow felt similar to last year where they would give up a lot in the first half and then make a few adjustments and play a little better in the second half. And the totality of it is like, oh, the defense isn't great, but they made just enough key stops. That is what Detroit has trended toward these last few weeks in particular, where early in the year, even after Hutchinson got hurt, it was like this defense is still playing really well in Detroit. In the other part about this one, the importance of it, for Detroit in particular, if they do get the week off, they're 1 week closer from getting maybe Carlton Davis back. We know Alex Anzalone, we heard yesterday on the show, might be out there this week. We'll see. But if they can get Anzalone and Carlton Davis back, all of a sudden the whole conversation changes for this defense because there's a trickle-down effect in the entire secondary, and Anzalone is their leader at linebacker. So this is almost, if Detroit wins, this is just buying them some time to kind of getting closer to full strength on that side of the ball.
And I think for both teams, genuinely, you said the stakes couldn't be higher. I think it's true. Like, home field advantage for each one of these teams, I think, is massive. Early in the season, we talked about the difference it makes, and Nick Wright was arguing this, right? If the playoffs have to go through Detroit and Ford Field versus, can you go on the road to Philadelphia out in the cold in January? That's not on the table anymore, but your building, Ford Field, versus Minnesota's building, same idea. Like, if everything has to go through Minnesota, where the noise exists and everyone's got to try and diagnose Flores' defense at the same time as trying to hear yourself think and be able to communicate, that's massive in a playoff environment.
Just to talk about Darnold for a little bit, again, we've raved about him all season. Still believe in PFF's grading and their analysis as far as ranking players and painting a good picture of where a guy's played. He's got the 6th best PFF grade. The other way that we've often described players through the years is with big time throws and turnover-worthy plays, and kind of encouraged fans. If you just look at those two numbers, say instead of touchdown to interception ratio, you might actually get a pretty good picture of how a player's played, and you lose some of the noise of the 1-yard touchdowns and scheme touchdowns and fluke interceptions and everything. It paints an interesting picture for Darnold, though. He's 3rd in big time throws, 4th in big time throw percentage, but the turnover-worthy play percentage is kind of high, right? It's high for one of the better quarterbacks in the league. It's tied for 13th highest, so it's not egregious, but the total itself is 3rd. He's put the ball in harm's way.
Yeah.
And to repeat again, one of the most impressive things to me about Darnold's season is when he's made mistakes, he's still bounced back, right? The same thing Baker Mayfield has done, the same thing Geno Smith has done. When you expect these guys who, kind of broke out, oh no, they're going to lose it. No, Sam Darnold's not going to lose it, but he might make a few mistakes in there, and that's how Detroit has played, and that's what they're banking on. So can Kirby Joseph get his hands on a couple passes in this game? Like, that is legitimately going to come down to you can't lose possessions on either side of the ball.
Yeah, even just the two names that he is right behind in terms, or level with and behind in terms of PFF's turnover-worthy play rate, I think paint an interesting picture. He's tied with Drake May, who we've been saying outside of the one pass every game that he throws to the defense, plays really well. So that's a sort of similar idea, is that Darnold is basically pitching the ball to the defense at least once a game at this point, right? And then the other player is Matthew Stafford, for whom that's always been kind of a trend as well. Like, Stafford has always given the defense opportunities, including in their Super Bowl run where he put the ball in a Buccaneer defender's hands in the end zone. Like, he threw the ball a couple of times, and it's whether or not teams take advantage of those. And we saw last week, the comeback for Green Bay kind of started when Darnold made his first big mistake, put the ball in harm's way, turnover. So, yeah, the chances are Darnold is going to give Detroit a chance at some point in this game to turn the ball over and steal a possession in what could be a shootout, could be an old Big 12 type of game, could be an Arena League type of game where you're talking possessions, right? And that's a possession that instead of ending in points goes to the other team, and that could be huge.
Lions, of course, scored the most points per game of any team in the NFL, 33.3 points per game. It goes up to 35.9 at home. So the Dome's going to be rocking. Lions are tough to stop at home. I thought back when Detroit lost in week 2 against Tampa Bay, I said that the only team that's going to beat Detroit is really themselves, Goff, turning the ball over, whatever it might be. That's showed up a couple times this year, but not crazy. Buffalo really took it to them in that win. But I still think Detroit is the team to beat here, even though Minnesota continues to impress. And they're right there. I don't want to diminish how well Minnesota's played, the difficulty in playing their defense, even though Detroit has had great success against them, and how Minnesota's offense is constructed. All those playmakers, Justin Jefferson's gravity and just overall dominance when they do target him. Jordan Addison as one of the best wide receiver 2s in the NFL, if not the best. Love Jordan Addison, what he brings to the table. TJ Hawkinson and Darnold's aggressiveness. So both teams are going to be aggressive. They're going to throw the ball down the field. They're going to create big play opportunities. It really probably does come down to stealing a possession on somewhere.
Yeah.
Or special teams, something that we're not going to be able to predict, or missed kicks, right? I mean, it's going to come down to all the stuff we're not talking about right now.
Yeah, it's annoying because, these are two extremely well-matched teams, as demonstrated by their record and the score and the way that the last game against each other went. I think they're very similarly set out as well for slightly different reasons. Both offenses are dominant. Both defenses, I think, will struggle to contain the other one. But then, so it's going to come down to those things. Either random special teams plays, always a complete, effectively random variable in any given game, who muffs a punt, who, houses a kick return, who blocks a kick, one of those things. The turnovers we've been talking about, right? Darnold will probably give the Lions an opportunity. Do they take it? Flores might be able to create an opportunity with his blitz confusion scheme. Do they take it? And then the last variable that we talk about every single week with Detroit, they are going to give you 3 or 4 fourth downs. Can you hold on them, right? Flores' defense doesn't need to be good overall. It can bend a lot, but when the Lions go for it on 4th and 3, can you make that play? If they can, that's a possession, right? Those are the turnovers.
You're right. The fourth downs and the actual, calculated turnovers.
Right.
That's what it all comes down to. It's hard-hitting analysis here for us.
It's frustrating because it's reductive and simplistic, but what it's going to come. Those are literally the highest leverage plays in the game.
Both offenses have success. I am just fascinated to know if Flores does anything to change tendencies,
right,
and does anything extreme. And just to add to the storyline just a little bit, and Matthew Collar mentioned this a little bit yesterday. Remember, there was a point in Jared Goff's career where the overload blitz, the zero blitz, he threw a potential game-ending interception against the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Brian Flores' defense, zero blitz. Goff, seeing ghosts, chucked it up. Sorry, Darnold. 2020 game, Flores' Dolphins, zero blitz against Goff and the Rams, couldn't handle it. It's a whole new Jared Goff right now, whole new system. It's like the Lions, Ben Johnson, a re-energized Jared Goff. They're different now, right? It's not the same system. They have different answers. They've had answers for Flores. So it's an interesting storyline that this Flores, not to say like Goff's kryptonite, but it was definitely Goff's weakness was the way Flores likes to play defense. And now it's one of Goff's strengths, now that he's paired with Ben Johnson, plus the playmakers, right? When we talk about teams having answers against the blitz, to me it's always about QBs and receivers being on the same page. There's none better than St. Brown in the NFL, plus Ben Johnson, plus Goff within the system, right? That's why it's all working. So that's why I'm real interested to see if Flores changes. And if he doesn't change and they give up 40, and then they go to Minnesota, goes to Tampa Bay, and they win, and they go to Detroit in 2 weeks again, I'm going to just replay my same question.
Well, yeah.
Does Flores change this time after getting torched 4 straight times instead of 3 straight times?
That's kind of, part of it is how do they read the last game, right? Do they think that that's now 3 straight games where we've gone blitz heavy, aggressive, and we've gotten gashed, therefore it's time to change it up? Or do they look at it in a similar way that I do and say, I think this time was different to the last times, and actually we're still on the right track now that we've upgraded personnel. This time around it will go our way a bit more, and that will be the difference. I wonder if the potential prospect of them facing another time in the playoffs means they might stick with what they know, right? We'll give it another go now. If it doesn't work this time, then we can still beat Tampa Bay. And if we have to face them again, then obviously we change it up, right? Yeah. As opposed to let's change it up now because it's all on the line right now. I wonder if they would give it another shot this time. The other element, though, is all that blitzing. Detroit's offense isn't just good, it's so explosive, right? I mean, Troy Aikman was trying rather implausibly to argue that Jameson Williams is the fastest player in the NFL, even though a guy just entered the NFL who ran a 4.21 combine.
He basically said he thinks he runs a 4.1, which would be the fastest ever.
Right. And I believe him.
He didn't push back.
Therefore,
like people believed Bo Jackson and Deion ran 4.1, so who's to argue?
Jameson Williams, extremely fast and explosive. Jahmyr Gibbs, extremely fast and explosive. Amon-Ra St. Brown, extremely good, fast and explosive, right? And when you blitz, you isolate those guys one-on-one against what are probably the weakest personnel areas of that Minnesota defense, i.e. the cornerbacks, right? Shaquille Griffin, okay, he's an average starting corner. Stephon Gilmore was once an amazing starting corner, but is now old and slower than he used to be and not as good. Byron Murphy, the best performer of the 3, I mean, he's good, but he's not a match for, Amon-Ra St. Brown. You isolate those guys one-on-one against explosive, speedy athletes. So it's such a tightrope to walk if you're the Vikings defense.
It really is. So I can't wait, man. The people were tweeting me, are you going to wait?
All night, all day.
You're going to wait all day
for Sunday
night? Kind of. I'm going to wait at Circa, at the sportsbook, while watching 14 games ahead of it, 13 games ahead of it, and then I'm going to watch it. But I'll be in the back of my mind, I'll be waiting a little bit for the game of the day, the game of the year, 14-2 versus 14-2, number 1 seed on the line, number 5 seed on the line. As the chat says, coach of the year may be on the line between Dan Campbell and Kevin O'Connell. Any other analysis you want to bring to the table before making your all-important pick?
No, I don't think so. Is there any award this year that's actually, clear? I mean, MVP is a mess every week. We've been making Defensive Player of the Year cases for everybody. I mean, I know Kevin O'Connell is the favorite for Coach of the Year, but, you can make a compelling case for a lot of people. Every award this year seems to be wide open.
Off the top of my head, I could see Saquon getting Offensive Player of the Year.
Just as the non-MVP, here you go deal.
And, that just being the most likely answer to that award.
Sure. But even that,
Jaden Daniels probably gets Offensive Rookie despite Brock Bowers' stats.
Yeah. That's one that should be close, but probably isn't.
Jared Verse probably gets Defensive Rookie, right?
That's the clearest one, I think.
Yeah.
That's the clearest one.
But yeah, there's, stuff on the line. Head coach, Coach of the Year on the line. Maybe Darnold's Comeback Player of the Year.
I don't know that he qualifies because he wasn't hurt. So they've
what were the new? Ross was breaking down the new qualifications.
Yeah. I'd have to find the ballot.
Let's not do that right now.
It basically means they've effectively introduced the Joe Flacco rule, which is you now need to be coming back from something that kept you out. You can't just be coming back from not being good.
Joe Burrow, Comeback Player of the Year.
Yeah.
Coming back from the wrist.
From the wrist injury. You can't just be coming back from not being good last year.
You can come back from death.
You can.
I mean, how can you trust any voting after DeMar Hamlin does not win Comeback Player of the Year? You people, unbelievable. All right, let's make some picks.
Okay.
Detroit by 2.5. Where are you going to go?
We'll go with the Lions to win and cover at home.
You are?
Yeah.
I don't want to do 3. Harry's going to take Detroit. I'll just take Minnesota. Just do it. I think it's Detroit. I'm taking Minnesota. Just
at this point, it's not like the games matter to you anymore.
115th and whatever. Picks are all just for fun, right? We're not encouraging to do either way. We're just having fun. Anyway, that's it. How many regular season games is that? So it's 17 times 32. Every game.
17 times 32 is 5.
16.
Oh, don't do that.
Divide it. Times 6. 17 times 6. What is it?
God.
Times 16.
272.
272 games previewed so far this year. We did it. Every single game.
Yeah. Remember
That's
when we
it.
knew things like that in our head because we had to do them all?
Yes, we used to grade all the games
Yeah.
and know how many there were. And then you'd multiply it by 4 when college football started.
Beautiful.
It was awful. Anyway, we appreciate everybody for being here all season, for subscribing, for supporting. Check the mic and everything we've started. We're not going anywhere. It's just,
No.
hey, it's like a little
Thank you for so far, but
next,
there's more. Yeah.
next tick box here. Happy New Year to everybody. If you were just tuning in today and you missed yesterday's show, which was the real New Year show. So yeah, join us at Circa this weekend. We're going to go live Sunday night. So if you're on YouTube, don't forget, we're going to go live Saturday night, but also Sunday night, more importantly, with our full 2.5-hour recap of Week 18. So big weekend. Enjoy Week 18 of the NFL. And we'll see you again Sunday night with more. Check the mic.